Welcome back to the 10 Tabs Open podcast. This is your host, Alex Howell, and today was the first time that we had on two guests. For episode 17, we had back on the show Kory Gallagher, who you all know from his workings at the University of Missouri for his doctorate, as well as working at the Barstow School in Kansas City. He brought on a doctor of history as well, who also has a degree from the University of Missouri in Columbia, and his name is Jonathan Root. And everybody calls him Root, and Root has done some absolutely amazing research that we get to in mainly the second part of our interview. The first part is basically these two guys who are far more intelligent than me explaining how I don't know how to make a pick in fantasy football, which is completely fine because they're probably right, and it's all supposed to be a game, even though I think we make fun of each other more than anything else. But really intelligent guys, lots of different subject matter, politics, history, fantasy football, you name it, we talk about it. So hope you guys enjoy. Let me know in the comments what you think about the show, and obviously just visit us at 10tabsopen.com. Check it out there. You can check out my personal website, alexanderhowell.com, with links to the podcast, with links to Danny Howell Real Estate Team, which is the real estate team out of RE/MAX that I am a part of in Kansas City, as well as a link to the book, The Retired Millennial, which I wrote a couple of years back. Don't judge me too much on it. First book is what it is. Anyway, guys, hope you enjoy. Episode 17, Kory Gallagher, Jonathan Root. Enjoy.
Time to make hay.
It's not good. It's not good.
All right, I think we're good. Go ahead and talk. I'm just fucking around.
All right, man. Yeah. So no, I'm not gonna get banned from the archives because I scanned
Everything.
Dude, let's tell you what this last trip.
When you say the archives, I'm really worried it's like the constitutional archives and I'm going to get fucking jailed.
I don't care about that. Nah. I go down there and burn that place down.
Fuck the National Archives.
Yeah. We need a new constitution anyway, so let's burn this one and start a new one.
The National Archives can literally eat my dick.
Yeah. So I did a research trip recently. It was, those are always tricky. This one I don't think was very successful. It was, but I don't know.
You should hold that story because just like the method by which you have to do your research, that in and of itself is super interesting.
It was a complicated trip. It was complicated.
So we need to start fantasy football and then move on.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay. Awesome. So Kory, eat a dick. By the way.
Yeah.
I had to eat shit the entire draft. Because of who I was picking.
If you look at
which you deserved. You deserved, by the way. Taking quarterback in the first round.
If you look in the dictionary under Homer, there's a picture of Alex Howell
holding up a Chiefs jersey.
You are such. you can't.
I've never even done that. That's just the first year.
I
think
that's bullshit. I think if we looked back,
I think my first year in the league, someone took RG3 in the first round.
That was Whitney.
Oh, that was Whitney.
God.
And you know who I took? Kirk Cousins.
The first round?
Not in the first round. I think it was like round 6, but I just looked over at Kory and was like, you know who I'm about to take.
Yeah.
I like Kirk Cousins. Me and my boy Bob Fisher, we like Kirk Cousins.
Well, that was a Homer pick by
Kirk.
Whitney because she lives in D.C.
That's right. I knew that. Yeah.
But you know, she's not even such a homer that she took a terrible defense as her backup defense, which you did.
I did.
Yeah, that Chiefs defense looks real hot after today.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it was impressively terrible. I know.
Oh, and having a backup defense in the first week of fantasy football is also bold.
That's
man, you do you, right?
Yeah,
that's a bold move, Cotton.
But with a 14-team league, it doesn't matter, right? Because the waiver wire is garbage now. unless I was talking to Kory, who's a Patriots receiver. He's a rookie who's apparently going to be really good. See, it doesn't matter.
Kory decided to take 2 Patriots receivers this time.
One of them wasn't a
move.
Patriot when I took him. I mean,
it's gonna make the difference, man.
That was my homer pick of the decade, and now it's not even a homer pick.
That'll teach you.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a very strange draft overall. Just because I like every single person that I wanted, I felt like just immediately got taken off the board. And I was looking like several deep. Like, okay, so I'm 5, so I get 5, and then there are like 9 picks after me, and then another 9, and then I get a pick again.
Yeah.
So it was like, okay, so I'm filling my team, and my only strategy, and it's a terrible strategy, and you should never do this, is like I need to fill my team, like my roster, and then I'll worry about the rest. And that's not how you should do it, and I know, but every single year I do that, so I'm just like, all right, so I'm going to look at this person because that's going to be a good choice. And it's never a good choice because somebody picks it like 3 picks before I do.
What do you mean fill your roster? Like, I fill my roster for backups. Like, I don't do any research. I sit down, fantasy night, and
I think what Alex is getting at is like he thinks that like before I start picking up non-starters, I have to fill all my starters.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Which is why we get things like, oh, I'm going to take a kicker in the 8th round.
I do that up until
which I think you did.
Okay,
right?
Okay. Yeah. No, what I do is until I get to like defense and kickers, I fill my roster. So I took a defense and kicker the last couple of rounds, but until I get to like round whatever that is, like million, that's when I start thinking about kickers and defense. But before then, I'm filling my roster first with skill players.
Yeah, and that makes all the sense in the world. The reason that I do, and it's not like
there's no good reason.
No, there's no good reason. And you're talking to somebody who's never like I've taken number 3 a couple of years. That's my top. Like it's either 3 or like 10th, and that's it. But I always do that. And the reason I do it is because like there have been times where all of my picks are terrible. Take, say, this year. There are times where, like, my kicker has gotten more points than anybody on the team. So I'm just like, I'm just going to fill it and fuck it, and we'll move on.
I don't know. That might be an okay move because I don't know.
Dude,
I think it could. I don't know. I could see it. I could see that working, actually. Yeah. Because we have 14 teams in our league, right? That's a lot because the waiver wire is going to be nothing, and you have all your starters locked down right now.
What is the conceivable point difference between the best kicker in the league?
I had a week
enough
where
to win fantasy,
and
I had a week where my running back, and quarterback scored 9 points.
Enough.
Kicker scored 15.
Enough of a difference to win fantasy. That's for sure.
It's not the kicker's fault that Alex can't draft a team.
No, it's not. With that, those kickers' points might make a difference between a win and a loss, right? So.
I mean, yeah, they can, but I don't know that like a running back you would draft in the 8th or 9th round, you wouldn't be better off. I mean,
it's also true.
It's
also true. Yeah.
Again,
value. It's about finding value.
Because I think I got Dalvin Cook pretty late.
Yes,
did you
really?
did.
I did.
Yeah.
It just dropped, just kept dropping and dropping. And I know. I kept looking at that.
He's probably going to get hurt, but
maybe.
But the way he played today, I got Dalvin Cook deep.
He did pretty good today, right?
Yeah. He had a couple touchdowns.
It's probably the same round that I took my kicker.
Yeah,
it might have been actually. Yeah. I saw that kicker go early. I was like, someone got a kicker.
You could have had Dalvin Cook.
See, my thing is that so I don't do any research, but I'm during it. Like I'm just like, oh my god, dude, I should have looked earlier. I should have done something because $40. I mean, it's not a ton of money, but still, like that's $40, right? That's meals for a week. No. And I saw a kicker go. And I was like, shit.
See, that's what I'm actually doing. I'm messing with you guys.
I screw up somewhere.
Yeah, right.
Am I?
Then
is there this one kicker that everyone's like, dude, take that kicker early because I disagree with taking Mahomes in the first round, but third round I would have taken Mahomes if he was available.
Sure.
Yeah.
So
first round is early, but second or third round if he's still there, it's like, I'll take Mahomes this early.
Yeah, and I understand that. My thing was I always look, and I get tricked a lot, obviously. But, like, I look at projected points, too. And, like, when today started, the projected points for Mahomes, it was, like, 32. My best running back was 22.
Right.
I was like, I know that it's a tidal wave or a placid lake. But that was one of those things I was like, well, I could get the guy that threw for 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns early, and again, I was number 5, so there's nothing I'm going to do outside of that. I was like, or a running back that every single time I picked a running back in the first round, they blow their ACL.
See, that's the thing, and with 14 people in the league, I don't know, man. There's some, so it's like, so I was thinking about this in light of the Ezekiel Elliott signing. It's like, dude, that's way too much money for a running back, but you get those rare. Like I would pay Saquon that much money in a second because they're that rare running back that
it is too
they're
much
worth
to pay
it.
He's
for
a
running back,
goddamn
except
bull.
for
Zeke and
Saquon and Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah.
I mean that right. I mean, yeah, running backs are a dime. I mean, you put a good offensive line, and one of us could run for average for 3 yards, right?
Yeah.
Because
well, that was a whole Trent Richardson thing,
right?
Like I remember there was always these pictures of him like, here's the gap.
Right.
He's going the other way.
Right. Yes. Exactly. Right. I mean, so you know, like you really don't need a lot of. You don't need to invest a lot at that position, but if you have one that's a game changer, if you got Zeke, that changes everything.
Saquon.
My problem with Zeke, the reason why I would balk at paying him that kind of cash is that dude does not block consistently, and for that amount of money. You better be doing some blocking on pass coverage.
He's going to have to be,
Yeah. Something. I don't know.
Yeah.
I have nothing to add. The reason I keep looking back here is because I've had an episode lately that cut out, so that's why I'm looking back, and I'm just making sure. Once that keeps going, I won't look back
it's
at all.
Good
but
so
that's
far.
Well, this is
it's going good.
This is a good segue, actually, because I have a criticism of the podcast.
Fuck off.
And my criticism is that there's no sponsorship.
Not yet.
And so I feel like we should take this opportunity to try to get us some free stuff.
Yeah.
So, our poor fantasy football choices have been brought to you by Rieger Whiskey. Rieger Whiskey, when you just need to make a really bad pick.
Yeah, I actually asked somebody
I'm not sure you're
from
allowed
Rieger.
to do that, are you? Just mention the name of a thing.
Well, that's where we had our fantasy draft. I'm just recording historical.
And then you also have to come back with they're not sponsoring
they're not
us.
a sponsor.
They're not sponsoring us. Yeah.
They're not a sponsor. But I would like for Rieger Whiskey to personally sponsor me because I feel like I've given them enough money that I've personally sponsored them. So I think that's only fair.
I'm not sure that's how it works. I have a question.
Their whiskey is amazing.
What is the name of this podcast?
10 Tabs Open.
Okay.
So it started from a conversation with me and my brother, and I was.
That sounds real bad, but I don't know what this podcast is. What it's called?
No.
And here I am.
The 10 Tabs Open podcast. And the reason that I named it that was I was having a conversation with my brother, and I was looking to start a podcast, and I was like, I don't want to limit myself to who can come on here. I want it to pretty much be anybody that I find interesting or that has an interesting story behind them. So I was reaching out to all these people to bring them on, and then I started thinking about it. I was like, we were having that conversation, and he mentioned, he's like, every single time I'm on the computer, all of my windows are open. I was like, yeah, I pretty much have 10 tabs open all the time because my dumb ass goes into a rabbit hole. I'm just like, man, where do the Tennessee Titans get their name? Who owns the Tennessee Titans? What's the best running back? Who was the last time? What was the first person to do this? What was the and I just go into that, and so by the time I open everything up, it's like I have 10 open, and I just attributed that to I'm an idiot and go down a rabbit hole. But that also means that I'm interested in a bunch of different shit. So if I do that, then I'm good to go. I always have to explain it, so that's,
no, you're fine.
That's
this
where
does bring up another question I have, though.
Fuck.
Is that no, this is not about the podcast, but this is. So a friend and I were talking the other day, and we were wondering, and I saw a spider, and so we're wondering, is that
how high are you?
I'm okay. That there's like estimates that you eat however many spiders in your sleep.
I think
3 a year.
Like, how do you know? Like, how would you empirically?
Well,
and so I wonder, that's got to be a rabbit hole somebody I know has gone down. And I texted one person I thought had gone down it, and they had not. So, but still, it's saying like, how would you?
Well, and it's an average too, right? And that's the freakiest thing. It's like, there are people that don't eat any.
Yeah.
There are people that eat 100 a year.
Eat a lot.
I don't think I have. Yeah, I don't think I have.
Oh, really? You just you just intrinsically know that while you're sleeping, spiders aren't getting sucked into your mouth?
Nah.
Okay, that's cool.
Have you ever pulled back the sheets and a spider runs by?
I don't know, maybe.
Not since college.
You have not lived in the middle of nowhere then, because I see that more than once a year. Like, not more than 2 times, but 1 to 2 per year. And every single time I see that, I immediately kill the damn thing and go,
dude, I'm terrified.
No, I know. Oh, and I hate spiders. I could grab a snake by the head and have no issue whatsoever. Those don't bother me whatsoever. But spiders, I will. If there was one right here, I would run through the windows and into the pond.
Yeah, no, they terrify me. I hate them.
I can handle that better than I could a snake.
I hate
Oh, yeah?
snakes. Yeah.
Snakes, no. I don't do snakes.
They don't bother me at all. Like,
Indiana
when,
God,
Jones.
Jesus.
let's say that, to be fair, if there was like a rattlesnake ready to go, like, I'd run
I'd be
away.
out.
But just like, I mean, our lake house has tall weeds and a lake. Like, you see snakes and just
Yeah.
like take them and launch them. Like, whatever. It's not a big deal.
No. hard pass on that.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
I'm from California, so.
Well,
I don't
yeah,
really-
but you also told me about
Well, yeah, we
all
have
the-
snakes. We
well,
have weird.
well, you have snakes and you have a lot of needles.
A lot of needles. Yeah.
Because you're not from certain
Not
like
from a nice part of California.
No.
no.
you're
no.
from Nate Diaz, California.
Yes, yes. Stockton's own Nate Diaz. Nate Diaz. That's right.
Yeah.
He's
Every
a badass.
single time I hear he or his brother Nick, like Stockton, like
Yeah, Stockton.
just like
That's right. That's
fucking
my
Kory,
hometown.
God
Yeah,
damn it,
209.
209,
209.
God damn it.
It's area code.
Yeah.
Well, I figured
Well, I just
I didn't
thought I'd
think it was their
clarify
address or
just
something.
in case.
209 South Main Street, baby. That's where we're from.
One of these days, mentioned to Kory, we're going to have a discussion about trashy people. So I'm from Topeka.
Oh, nice.
And lived in Montera for a long time, and so a lot of trash. And we're going to have to talk something about Stockton versus Topeka trash. And there's got to be a lot of overlap.
Versus Sedalia trash.
Oh yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Sedalia
Yeah,
trash.
we both lived in Sedalia.
for a hot
Ooh,
minute.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's-
yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty gross out there. But yeah, no, it's it's interesting actually. This is something that Root and I have spent some time discussing here recently, is because we did this trip out to Pittsburgh, right? And in Pittsburgh,
You went to Pittsburgh?
he was
Yeah.
on the Pittsburgh trip.
Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Oh
Pittsburgh-
my God!
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
I know.
Someone
Yeah.
in my old
Not
job,
Pittsburgh,
and I
Kansas.
working at Target, and we were like, wait a minute, you going to Pittsburgh, Kansas? And I was like, God, no. I'll go burn it down. But, nah, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Yeah.
I am so excited now. I'm
was
so
awesome.
excited.
And
It was
for this.
amazing.
I have Root. I have regaled Alex with some stories that are not podcast suitable.
They might
And
be.
we won't be sharing. But when we were in Pittsburgh, we had, and no offense to Pittsburgh, because I think this would happen in any city that
It was
we
a
were
beautiful
in.
city.
It's a beautiful city. Yeah, actually,
gorgeous.
if you haven't been to Pittsburgh, I highly, highly recommend
Back
it.
to-
It
back
was
to
really
football.
awesome.
Walked by Heinz Field, and my little lizard brain.
Oh,
was like,
yeah.
football.
Football.
When's football coming back? Yeah.
Mm.
But
But that's not
when,
the Pittsburgh you
when
guys
we were
saw.
when we were in yeah, we were at Heinz Field for like 10 minutes. When we were in Pittsburgh, we had this weird experience where we just sort of like kept running into people who were very different from us, right? And people who, had not gone to college, people who worked like really, blue collar jobs, and all of that is perfectly fine. But we spent, we were with other people who we'd gone to grad school with. And so people who have like really strong feelings about like working class consciousness and things like that. And so we ended up spending a lot of the trip sort of being like, so here's this working class person we've encountered in a really sort of strange way. Do they think of themselves in this way? Do they have any desire for their life to actually be better?
That's interesting.
Do they understand what better would even look like? And this is, I think, the most important thing was as us as, people who are all academics, is our conception of what a better life for them match with their conception of what a better life for them is. And so we really found ourselves, you want to talk about going down the rabbit hole, like really having these very deep philosophical conversations about a guy we encountered at a
yeah, we
restaurant who had like a crazy neck tattoo. And it's like, what?
Oh, yeah, that's right. We did. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like
yeah.
what
Yeah.
choices,
Yeah.
like what led you to this crazy neck tattoo? What does that mean for your other life choices?
Right.
And then for the people that we encounter in our regular day life, who I think kind of tend to romanticize the working class,
Right.
like how does their conception of the working class match his conception of working class? And it got, especially in light of some of the conversations happening around the
Right.
Democratic primary,
Yep.
it turned into a really interesting conversation that we'll in no way be able to do justice to now.
No, but I mean it could.
But it was kind of interesting, because we all, I don't think we necessarily, most of us work in education or somehow, tend to be kind of removed from that world. And yet when faced with it, it was kind of like, whoa, this is not the way we've been discussing this.
Right.
And this now feels a little bit odd, if that makes sense. Root has a little bit of a different perspective on this.
So I've had a number of like blue collar jobs.
Yep.
And I think the tendency to romanticize is problematic. But the other problem is that we experience a lot of times is an assumption that I know what they want.
Mm-hmm.
I know what's best for them. And so I worked at the Target distribution center in Topeka for a year. So I was loading trucks. I was throwing shit on a conveyor belt, right? I've worked in warehouses before. I've been a painter. I've done custodial work. I've done carpet cleaning. And it's that, I don't know, it's because I remember asking some of the guys at Target about unions, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, nah, I'm good. This job, I don't like it, but I'm making enough money to basically live a middle-class life.
Yeah.
Like, I can go on vacation. I can pay for my kids to go to school. What else do I need? And you're like, yeah, basically. What else is there? I think a lot of it comes down to is that it's a lot of people we know, they talk about these kinds of jobs. It's jobs they don't want to do, so they assume no one else wants to do them.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And so it's, I mean, 'cause I have nothing but sympathy, or at least a sense of empathy of the working class, right? Because I've had those jobs, but it's also, there's no reason to put them on a pedestal, right? Because in a lot of ways, one, you shouldn't, and for a lot of reasons, and two, it's like, well, they've achieved what we want, which is the middle class dream. They can buy a house, they can own a car, they can put their kids through school. One guy had been there for a while, and he's like, you know what? What happened with us is that we took family vacations. I never could. So, I'm fine working here.
Yeah.
Nah, I mean, it's just so interesting that, if anything, it gets back to it should give strength to the Frankfurt theory of capitalism, right? Because the Frankfurt theory is basically that the problem with capitalism is consumerism, because that's what makes people dull, is consumption. Because if you can buy stuff, you can watch TV.
Yep.
That's what we've created as a good life, when really your life sucks, right?
Well, and isn't it wonderful that that's like 45 to 55% of our GDP is
right?
consumer?
Yeah, and that's the Frankfurt theory. It's like until you can, or part of it is until you can undermine consumption, you're never going to have a working class revolution now, because I can go to Walmart and buy 60-inch plasma TV. I can buy a home. Right? What's more of the good life than that?
Yeah.
Until you get rid of that, there's no.
It was an interesting experience, because after having been, being trained historians and on a trip with other trained historians, and so much of that is sort of focused on this very Marxist perspective of class consciousness and socioeconomics playing into the decisions that you make, and then sort of being confronted.
And I want to say one thing before you continue, and I apologize for interrupting you, but when you say, and just because I know, like, I see the people that when you talk about Marxist, it's keep going, but just explain that part.
Okay, yeah. Good call.
Yeah.
I'm not a Marxist, but I use Marxist theory. So.
Yeah, well, and that's what we hit on in the last podcast, and I thought you outlined it really well. I just want to make sure that anybody that's listening to this understands.
Yeah, so it's just the idea that your economic life, where you are economically, has a significant impact on your understanding of the world.
Put simply, you have money or you don't.
And if you have money, it changes. You have a different outlook than if you don't have money. Right?
100%.
And that's kind of what it boils down. And Marx basically says that all of history can be understood through understanding these differences in material wealth.
Yeah, and he's not wrong.
Yeah,
And he's
no,
not
he's
wrong.
not wrong at all.
Yeah,
No.
not wrong.
Yeah.
So this is,
And you're and I brought this up too. It's like you're talking to a former libertarian candidate. Like, I'm not in any way, shape, or form like a socialist, but Jesus Christ, when you were explaining that, I was like, oh, but yeah, that's true.
right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So this is
That's
actually
what
this is one of those weird things about like like academics, right? Is like you would, of course, you would describe yourself as a Marxist, because why wouldn't economics play into your worldview? But
Right. And then you go a little
what
bit further, and you're like, no, 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 no,
Well,
no.
yeah, but what I don't mean by being a Marxist is that I want to go kill bourgeoisie scum and bathe
Yeah,
in their
yeah.
blood and that's not what I'm talking
Because
about.
spoiler alert, most of the Marxists we know are the bourgeoisie.
Yeah, I mean, and that's
Capitalism has done them well.
that
Yeah.
also played into our discussion. So you have this weird dynamic that happens within the halls of academia where the working class is sort of put on this pedestal, and so much of history in particular, but it happens in political science and sociology and basically everywhere in the arts and humanities, is really focused on like sort of understanding the plight of the working class, right? And then a lot of this discussion is fueled by people who've never done these jobs before.
Yeah.
You look at Root's experience. In college, I worked in a lumber yard. Recently delivered packages for Amazon. By no means am I not a member of the working class, or at least working class adjacent at this point in my life.
Right.
But those conversations are so fractured from that reality. And then it was interesting that on this trip we kept coming into contact with people who forced us to have these discussions, and it was really, really interesting.
Was it, when you were on the trip and you were having these conversations, was it uncomfortable or was it eye-opening? Was it both? Like, how do you justify that? Because I maybe justify is not the right word, but it's like
No, I know what you mean.
you're having the conversation of like, here's what's going on, but that's got to be a little uncomfortable because you have your own perceptions and then you don't know what they're saying.
It depends. This
Yeah.
trip was good enough dudes that it never got
No.
uncomfortable. Yeah, it
That's
can.
good.
But it can. Yeah, that discussion.
But it was in some ways it was sort of odd, because we would walk away from an interaction with somebody and then we would break down their whole life as if we actually knew anything about
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
Right, we would draw these assumptions based off of a 10-15 minute interaction or observation of them. And so that was odd. But at the same time, we couldn't, I think most of us on the trip, we'd walk away from these moments and be like,
No.
I think we've gotten something like a
Kinda,
little bit
yeah,
wrong.
but I'm just, maybe, but so I think, I remember these interactions, but I'm so used to being around that class
Right.
culture that for me
Right.
it's just like, whatever, right? It's just different, and I can talk and interact, and it's, I don't even think about it, right? I can switch on and off, which
Yeah.
sounds terrible. I had all these different
Mhm.
modes, right? 'Cause
Sure.
working at Target, right? I was very different there than I am here, or would have been in
Right.
a graduate class, because but I'm comfortable enough around the blue collar types that I can just easily just.
Yeah.
So what's interesting is, we can get back to this, but I wanted to bring up, I don't know. So Alex mentioned, kind of when Kory explained Marxism, that one of my favorite discussions I have with students is, this was what Marx said. There's no disagreeing, right? Is that his critiques of capitalism are 100% on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But
absolutely.
it's like, how do we now wrestle with that? As people in this classroom are probably generally capitalists, right? Like, you have some who are libertarian-leaning capitalists, and you have New Deal, kind of liberal, Democrat-leaning capitalists, but how do you... Basically what it comes down to is, how okay are all of us with inequality?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
How okay are you comfortable with it?
Well, what's your understanding of inequality?
Economic inequality.
Yeah,
that-
and I
Yeah.
100% agree with you, but I think part of the discussion has to be, what is your understanding of
right.
what inequality actually means? Because I think that, especially right now, we have so many people that push on a constant basis what inequality looks like as opposed to what inequality is. And
Right.
so you have a population, and I'm just going to limit this to the United States. Well, you have a population of 330 million people with 330 million different opinions, and they're being impressed upon by television personalities and television itself. So I don't think we actually really understand what inequality looks like. I mean, we're sitting here in a in a new construction home in an unfinished basement, we have no idea. Like, we've probably seen, but we have really no idea what the worst of the worst looks like.
No,
and
yeah,
I think
totally,
that when
totally, yeah.
when you see the worst of the worst, like, I mean, I have a family member that's a police officer, and it's not a typical everyday thing, but it's like he sees some really bad stuff.
Yeah.
And we don't ever get exposed to that. So you trying to understand everybody else's opinion is really difficult.
No, for
on
sure.
any side.
And historians have sort of this running debate between, it kind of all history more or less boils down to a couple different camps, and they more or less get along, except there's two camps that really don't, and that's social historians and cultural historians.
And there should not be a fight. But
And there should not be a fight.
Can you describe that for me? Because
yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know.
no. So social historians study what you are in reality.
Okay.
Right. So, you make this much money, you live in this neighborhood, you're this ethnicity, you're this education, right? You're
a number.
You're this. You're basically a number, right?
Yep.
Boils you down to your measurables to a large extent, right?
Okay.
That's a little bit simplistic, but it's kind of headed in the right direction.
No, it is, yeah.
Cultural historians try to understand what you think you are.
Oh, that's got to get difficult.
And that, well, it is. It's difficult because, first of all, you can't really prove it, right? That's one of the problems. Cultural historians argue endlessly among themselves because it's so open for interpretation. But this comes back to the whole issue of class, right? Is like historians, social historians in particular, will look at the working class and identify them as a singular being that is at the bottom of our socioeconomic rung that needs to be rescued by intellectual elites, right? Whereas a lot of times cultural historians will have the experience Root had, which was, well, the dude at the Target warehouse, thinks that he's living a middle-class lifestyle and is comfortable, and he thinks of himself as being middle class. So by virtue of thinking that, he is middle class. And so that discussion about working class for him is kind of moot.
Yep.
Does that make sense? So
Well, it's his perceived reality.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So I think the difference is that, so a big difference, so maybe to make this easier.
Yeah.
Not easier, but.
No, please make it
I
easier.
can say whatever.
I don't consider myself an
So
intellectual.
a debate with the social and cultural historians would be, when talking about class, like, is it, do you understand it materially? Like, is it a certain income level? Or is class a intellectual, religious kind of construct? That is it more of these intangibles, subjective experience? And so the way I've talked about it is my answer is always yes, right? It is all it's all those things.
Right.
That it is this cultural understanding of class, that I'm middle class, and so I have a nuclear family. I own a home. I have 2 cars. I go to church. And that's what it means to be middle class, right? Those are middle class bourgeois values. Economically, you may not make whatever number bean counter actuary nerds have crunched numbers to be middle class numbers. And so some of you want to understand the debate is that yes, Kory, you're right, that the middle class or the working class may say, oh, I'm middle class.
Right.
And a social historian would say, well, no, they're not, because they don't meet this criteria. And like, yeah, well, they understand themselves as middle class and the same kind of values of the middle class. And so they are, I guess, middle class. And so, but then that's where we would then say, as I think is why cultural historians ends up being better, so to speak, is that it's like, oh, that material still matters.
Right.
That material totally matters, which is how pervasive culture is. That cultural constructs of class matter way more than your actual material.
Absolutely. And
material value.
And this kind of goes back to the guy with the horrendous neck tattoo that we ran into on this trip. It was, really, when you start to think about it, we looked at that as just a purely economic. We looked at that sort of from a social historian's perspective, like, wow, you're really limiting yourself economically by getting this gargantuan, ugly ass
It was bad.
neck tattoo. I mean, It was a really bad tattoo on top of being on his neck, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
It wasn't like he had it right here, like
No,
on his chest,
no,
where he could
it's-
hide it. Yeah.
It's a terrible tattoo right on his neck, seared into
but
my
he's like,
memory.
I am the best fucking welder in
But
Pittsburgh.
that's what it was. It was the thing that we weren't recognizing at the moment that we came into contact with it was that for whatever culture it is that he is inserting himself into, whatever identity, that neck tattoo plays a role in that.
Yeah.
And so here we were discounting it, thinking only from an economic perspective,
Yeah.
when in reality it's fueled by something completely different that we don't get.
Right.
Yeah.
And if just pause.
Sure.
If you're smelling that, that's because we made pizza last night, and that's what the smoke
Oh.
is.
That's right. The house is burning down.
Yeah, the house is not burning down.
This will be the last podcast.
It's if the world can only hope. No, but that's probably my fault up there. So that's you can't hear it if you're listening, but that's what it is. I think it's really interesting to hear your guys' perspective on it because like I grew up like my father was a floor installer.
Sure.
So I was around new construction, resale, everything. And that was my entire life and understanding literally before I got involved in like musical theater, which talk about a mindfuck, that's pretty much the definition of it.
Yeah.
Sure.
But it was really interesting to me because I had several very strange interactions on construction sites where guys would contradict themselves and not really get it.
Mm-hmm.
And several times I'm holding this because it's going to shoot up in a second, but several times what would happen is they would say like, if I would have started my career in a union, I would have been lucky. But I don't do that. But fuck unions.
Yeah.
And that was the weirdest
Yeah.
thing. And like everybody, and up to and including myself, because I didn't understand what I was talking about because I was like 16. But like everybody up to and including me, everybody around the site was like, no, I would totally have been a part of a union 30 years ago. But fuck them because they tried to just, bring the cost up and we're actually here and we're going to work on it.
Yeah.
And the strangest thing for me was even at the time, if you're just listening to it and you don't have there's no chips involved, you don't really see the negative on either side. It's like, I get your side, 100%. If you're trying to work and you're just trying to earn $1 and you're not a part of a union, you can undercut their costs because they don't have to be a part of anything.
Sure.
Or you don't have to, fantastic. If you are a part of a union and you have to do what you have to do, but there are benefits involved, I completely
Totally.
understand.
Yeah, totally, yeah.
And I think, and again, I'm not smart enough and I have not done the research that you guys have, but I see something that is, and again, I think this is more, I have an issue with the fact that we're so divided overall in this regard, but you have two people that are trying to go to the exact same level and they're having the exact same conversation, but they're not willing to put in the work to actually think through it. And if you're talking about being intellectual, you can say, well, I believe this, but what you're really looking at are two people that kind of agree in the same way.
Yeah, absolutely.
And can't get through it.
But identity is a weird thing, man, and it's complex, and it doesn't necessarily make sense, and it doesn't, and that was what was, I think, so interesting about this trip. You took 5 guys who all went to grad school together, all have essentially the same training, more or less. We've all read the same book. I mean, we all talk in the same language, and our roles in society are, widely different, and with jobs that run from the, from academic to, working class gigs. And yet by virtue of our education, we've largely inserted ourselves into an intellectual bubble. And so I think it was sort of interesting for the 5 of us to encounter people we wouldn't normally encounter and together, and then have these conversations about them. And kind of what it boils down to is like, it's really, really hard to account for human behavior.
Yeah.
Totally.
And we've tried to account, and we try to account for these things in our politics, and we have a lot of discussions in our politics that I don't know are necessarily valid, I guess is what I would get at. Because there are such wide conceptions of what success means, and trying to boil that all down to economics or all down to a particular style of living, it becomes really problematic.
Yeah, I mean, like, not to get too into it, but like when you look at our current president and you see this is a guy who is worth at minimum several hundreds of millions of dollars, at maximum several billions of dollars, but I don't think and this is the weirdest thing about what just happened when he got elected was I don't think the average blue collar goes to church every Sunday person would normally look at somebody like that and say that's a good person, in the sense that he doesn't live the quote unquote moral life that somebody else would in that particular position would see that as. But they did. And he won.
I'm going to defer to Root on this one because since Root studies evangelicals.
Oh, yeah, I do. Yeah.
Can you?
Yeah.
Wait. You study evangelicals?
I do. Yeah.
Okay, so is this the transition?
I'm going to get another Coors Light.
Yeah.
Get it. It's right there.
Yeah.
Pop it, baby.
So,
no, because I want to. We can have this conversation while you get your beer.
So
we need to figure
little
some
known.
stuff out.
Hell yeah.
Little known.
Can you grab me one too, please?
At the University of Missouri, we have one of the
Which is the best school ever. By
obviously we have one of the finest historians of American religious history. Yeah. We have one of the greatest living historians of American religion, Dr. Wigger.
John Wigger.
Wigger.
By his book, PTL.
Yeah.
By his book, PTL.
And this
That
was
used to be a negative term.
this was yeah.
It still is. But buy his book.
This was Root's advisor.
Please buy it. John Wigger, PTL.
PTL.
Rise and Fall
Shouldn't
of...
you be trying to pimp out your own book?
It's not out for a
weirdo?
while.
What is
It's
your
been out for a
book?
while.
But what is your book?
It's going to be... Right now, it's titled Oral Roberts in the I should know the time of my own book. Oral Roberts. I know it. Oral Roberts and the Birth of the Prosperity Gospel.
There we go.
So Root, I mean, like, I've wondered, I've been kind of saving this question for the podcast.
Yeah.
Like, what is your take on why evangelicals are willing to put up with Trump's behavior that is so clearly out of line with their expectations for every other politician who's
Because it's never been about that. It's always been about power.
Oh, shit. We're getting into it now.
They wanted power, and Donald Trump promised power. And
well, and that's what he exemplifies.
Yeah, he gave him power, right? He said, I'm going to pick the right Supreme Court justice. I'm going to do whatever, bring back Christmas, whatever the hell else. No, it comes down to power. It's never about right living or wrong living. It's Trump promised power, and they took it. Yeah, it's idolatry, basically. It comes down to they're idolaters. They always have been.
I think it's really...
Yep, power. That's it, power.
Yeah. Well, and that's an interesting thing because somebody that I never, ever used to listen to, but when I think I say this enough where I try not to be a weird person about it. I've never voted for a Missouri governor that was Republican. Because I like the fact that if
Holy
we have
shit.
I never have. I've always voted for a Democrat because you're raising your eyebrows like this dude.
Yeah, I can't believe it.
No, I never have, and the reason that I haven't is because we have been on the right so much within the legislature that it terrifies me. And this is whether it's federal or state. It always terrifies me when one side has all the power.
Yeah, no, I hear that.
It freaks me out. So even though I was like, I don't like Jay Nixon, I'm going to vote for him because whatever. Yeah. But I've done that. And with Trump's situation, I looked at it and I saw both sides and just was like, no. This is the first time I just have to tap out.
I understand, but...
I get it.
You're part of the problem.
I know, well, you would say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tapped out and I voted third party.
No.
Oh.
Yeah.
I thought you were about to tell us you voted for Trump. Never mind. You're fine.
No.
Sure.
I
I'm
voted
in party.
third party.
You're part of the problem, but less guilty.
Don't do
Yeah.
third party in 2020.
I'll vote for Trump.
Can't.
No, I'm kidding.
Can't do third party in 2020.
No, I have no idea what's going to happen in 2020.
Can't.
If Biden goes, here's how I felt if let me break down my situation in 2016. Bernie was going, and I've been on record for this, and I think I told you this too. It's like I disagree with Bernie at pretty much every level.
Sure.
I was going to vote for him because I was like, fantastic, nothing will get done for 4 years.
Basically.
Yeah. I was like, fantastic. I'll vote for that guy. I disagree with him completely. Let's do it. And then he lost. I was like, well, I hate everybody right now. And I was watching election night, and I was just, is going to sound bad, but I felt like what is it? Nero was.
Oh yeah, big
Yeah.
time.
Playing his fiddle.
Yeah, playing his fiddle while
Yeah.
Rome burned. That's how I felt personally, because I was just like, I was laughing my ass off just because nobody predicted it.
Well, it wasn't supposed to happen.
It wasn't supposed to happen. It was the weirdest thing. It's like, how is it? And it wasn't like, to me, it wasn't Trump. Like, to me, the big thing was like, if Trump dies, it's Pence. How does that work out?
Well, I mean, think about what this says about America, that half of our country, or, you want to quibble over the numbers, 49.5%, whatever.
Yeah, whatever. It's half our country.
Half our country is so pissed off about the way that things are going that that's who they voted for.
Well, and
They're fine voting with an outright unapologetic racist.
Well, part of what they're pissed off about is not being able to be a racist anymore, right? I mean,
true,
for
yeah,
like a
yeah,
portion
yeah.
of that group.
I will say a portion. I won't say all.
No, certainly not all of them, right? But like largely, it's sort of a reaction to where we are, and there are various reasons why people are reacting. Some of them are reacting because of what they view as political correctness, and
I do think a lot of people got sold on they got sold by a salesman on something that they didn't think they bought. Here's what I mean. When it came out that, and I apologize for interrupting you.
no, go ahead.
The $1 trillion+ deficit that was announced a couple of months ago, I literally saw that on television. Was like, well, fucking yeah. Like, you can't.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not a big fan of taxes. Again, ran as a libertarian. Still cannot believe that everybody was like, well, I can't believe we have $1 trillion deficit. It's like, fucking really?
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 We would have had that doing nothing.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's what happened. And it was like, well, I mean, it's just, got to protect ourselves. From fucking who?
Mexico?
Yeah, from
Duh.
Mexico.
Yeah.
The country that we put a trade tariff up, and 2 days later they went, yeah, whatever you want to say.
Yeah, that massive army that's gonna invade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Guatemalan children.
Yeah, well, it's like, think about
Gonna
it. Like, Iraq
invade
had the
us.
4th largest military in the entire world. We beat them in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Like, we shouldn't have even been there, but they had the 4th largest military pretty much ever, because ever is now,
Right, sure.
and we beat them in 2 weeks. We don't have a lot to worry about. And now we have $1 trillion deficit because we needed an increase in military spending and a tax cut for what people think is a tax cut, but is really not a tax cut for them.
Yeah, I don't get it.
Yeah,
At least for most of us, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, for most of
I
us.
don't even try.
I think my paycheck went up like $15.
don't even
Was it
try.
awesome?
Which is great.
Was that per week or per month, though?
I think that was about per month.
Oh,
you
yeah,
know?
yeah.
Yeah, about $15 per month.
Damn
So,
it.
yeah.
It's not bad.
Yeah, yeah, nothing like $1 trillion deficit to piss me off.
This 6-pack of Boulevard's Bob's 47 has been brought to you by
A
the
tax cut.
deficit.
Yeah, dude. $1 trillion, man.
$1 trillion.
I'm about to suicide myself because you're sponsoring our deficit by that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, and then you look at a guy like Yang, right, who's running, and he's like, I'm going to cut everybody a check for $1,000 a month, and people are like, that's crazy. It's like, but is that really crazy?
As crazy as what's going on.
I mean, that's not as crazy
It's
as
not.
where we're at
Yeah.
right
It's not a
now.
bad idea.
I mean, in a lot of ways, it
Again,
makes a hell of a lot more sense than what we're doing right now.
I'll
right?
spend that. I'll spend
I'll
that
spend
shit.
that like a
I'll
mofo.
spend it, yeah.
Well, but when you look at what happened under Bush, when he was like sending checks out, like, please
I got a
still
check.
vote for us. Yeah,
But
a lot
yeah,
of people did.
I got to check. You know what I
I
did?
put it toward rent.
Actually, my
Which
mom.
Well,
is-
that's good. At least you put it towards
Yeah,
rent.
put it toward
Like,
rent, yeah,
most people
every
are
cent.
like, everything's dying. I'm just going to save it.
Well, it's
No, I would have spent it. I'm very bad at money. Once I get a little bit of money, I spend it.
it's funny because my reaction. So I got 2 checks from Bush. I got one for $300 and then one for $500 because
I
I
think
made because
I may have gotten two.
in a weird way I made
Same.
enough money for the second check. Which why are you sending
Hey.
checks to people who make enough? But anyways,
Oh, that's a Republican. God damn it.
Because at the time.
Right, it shouldn't be coming from them.
Right.
Uh,
because at the time,
This is the party that
thought,
I've always been affiliated
I
with.
thought
Sorry.
George Bush was a bad president. At the time, I thought George Bush was a bad president. I've recalibrated what I
still
think
right.
is bad,
Right.
right?
Right. Yeah.
I mean,
was,
mediocre. Mediocre is different from bad, right? At the time, I was so pissed off at him for doing this because I thought it was so stupid that I intentionally spent every dollar of that in Mexico. Both times I got the check, I took myself to Tijuana for the weekend, and I had a great time.
This is the most like moral hazard economic argument you could possibly have. It's like you cannot control what somebody is going to do with
absolutely
money.
can't.
What the fuck are you doing just trying to push this on
I bet
somebody?
most people spent it.
Well, you were
there-
supposed to spend
Is there
it.
numbers on that? How many people spent it versus? I bet
Well, no,
most spent it because
Actually,
I don't know.
a lot of people. If I get any extra money, I spend it. Which
The
is
last
why
time I saw
I'm in a hard place
something-
right now. Is that
Yeah.
I wasn't paying rent for a year and making a lot of money, and I don't have a whole lot to
Yeah, See?
claim. Yeah,
that's what you get for serving our community.
for spending money.
Yeah.
That's like it. It's like for working for AmeriCorps. Yeah.
I think most people ended up just putting it towards their mortgage, is what I think the research shows.
If they still had one, because they.
Well, right, because it happened at the same time as
Just
the.
about.
Yeah.
Just about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Almost the exact same time.
So it makes sense, right? That's
Yeah.
your last ditch effort.
Your last like
Yeah.
$400.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that for just 1 second, because my argument at the time was fuck the banks and we'll figure it out. And a lot of people were like, no, we have to keep them around because they're holding all the mortgages.
Yeah.
That
and
was clearly not correct.
Well, it was like, yeah, you broke Earth.
It would've
You
been a-
broke the planet,
It
basically.
would have been a lot worse if they hadn't bailed him out, though.
Yeah, that's what I think too.
That's
been
what I
way-
wonder about
It would have
that.
been way worse, which is the worst thing about it. It's like,
yeah.
what do you want? Is that you had to do it, right? You had to bail him out. As shitty as it is, things have been way worse if those. That's why they're too big to fail. It's like, yeah,
Well-
no, they fucked so many people.
Oh,
Yeah.
totally.
Intentionally, right? They
Yeah,
knew
right.
what they were. They knew what they were doing was unethical,
Yeah.
and that at the end, they would be safe. They knew it. They
Yeah.
knew that. Listen,
It was
doesn't matter what's
gambling.
gonna happen. They know they're going to bail us out,
Yeah.
and if they don't, then we're still. But they're not going to. Right? They knew it was going to happen, and it's you had to give them the money. There was no choice.
I want to say
It would
that.
fall apart. but
Every part of me says
been
like we
way-
should, and
it would've
every
been
part of me
way
is like,
worse.
no,
I mean,
you
I'm
no
not-
longer get
I'm
to
not
make
an
that decision.
economist, but it's also like I think.
Well, it is
Can't-
funny
can't
because
let those fail. I just couldn't.
this whole thing just demonstrates the degree to which we
Are dumb.
Well, it's funny because at the same, like the way that academics and progressives hold up the working class, right? You have conservatives who hold up capitalism,
Yeah.
right? And except that the large economic entities actually don't operate under capitalism because they know that they're always going to get rescued
Yep.
if they make poor choices.
Yeah.
Right. And the people that vote for people that back up those entities don't realize what
Yeah,
they're backing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
The people that normally vote on my side of the spectrum, don't realize what they're voting on.
No, not at all. And that's
If you want to
what's
get your phone, you can.
led to all of these. I will. I'm about to make a point here. But that's what's led to a lot of these. We're kind of back where we were, right? We're headed towards a recession.
Yeah.
You
There,
think?
yeah,
Yeah. And then
yeah.
there's
There'll probably be a bubble of some sort, right?
student loans.
Probably the student
Student
loan
loans
bubble,
are going to be a
maybe,
big
right?
issue eventually.
Yeah.
and then we're going to find ourselves right back in the same situation with a different issue. But there's no reason why it couldn't be a housing bubble, because certainly we've seen housing prices go nuts
Yeah,
here
they're
recently.
insane.
I mean, even in Kansas City, they're insane.
Yeah.
But all of this happened. The government bailed it out, and then there were zero changes made to the way in which these industries operate. There was no regulation.
They
I mean, that's
tried,
insane.
Right?
They tried,
yeah, we'll do a little bit, but ultimately,
but no,
no real meat behind it.
no real meat. I
teeth.
mean,
That
a
was
lot of the
nothing.
no teeth. Yeah.
a lot of the financial instruments that were banned for causing it were just renamed as something else and are now back. So we're exactly where we were before.
The only reason I don't think that and I will 100% give you that we may not be heading towards a recession. The only thing that I have to say is like we were so far down. Like when you take a 20-year tract of things, it's fairly normal. It's about 4 to 7%.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. But I mean, at some point, we've been growing for so long. There's no way that we're not going to experience.
Well, we're going for so long, but we cut the market
something.
in half, more than half. We were at 15,000. We went down to like 4,
But now we're at 20
6.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know last week, but
Until Trump says the next stupid thing.
Yeah, there's gonna be a recession
Or-
soon.
and again, libertarian thing coming out. or the Fed is just like, we really need to lower rates, and the whole market goes, why the fuck are you lowering rates? This makes no sense whatsoever.
Right.
And then everything tanks.
Well, right. I mean, recessions and depressions are totally man-made.
Yeah.
Right. There's nothing that says that you can't have continued economic growth. A lot of what ends up creating these things is the expectation,
speculation. Yeah.
speculation that there will be limited growth or no growth sometime in the
Or
future.
you think that you're going to get 20% returns out of China for 40 years.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. You know.
What do you? Hey, yeah, it will.
So
Yeah. Shit. Didn't work for Enron natural gas. Ain't gonna work for most people.
right. Yeah. But let me tell you a little something about a recession.
Let me tell you about Enron too.
Because I've recently been openly advocating the return to a recession. Happy hour has gotten too damn expensive.
Please don't. Please don't.
We need to go back. We need just a small period of recessionary.
I like that you want like a 2-month recession.
You have
like a 2-month recession.
you have a secure job. No
I do.
recession.
I
no
have
recession.
a secure job, so I
don't.
need
No recession.
Yeah,
Nah.
just a little
Just
itty
2 months.
bitty one.
It's gonna be worse for me now.
Just a nice,
None.
nice little tiny one. Kind of knock the shit out of happy hour. I mean, what is going on? You can't. Happy hour doesn't exist anymore.
No,
I miss it.
It doesn't, but I think that has more to do with rent prices, like we were talking about earlier.
Well, it's all interconnected,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, it's
Yeah,
100% interconnected. Yeah, I feel like we just bought our latest rental property, and they were like, yeah, we were getting this much for Airbnb and this much for rent. And I was looking at it like, okay, cool. That seems like a great rental price. And so I just thought, I'm going to put it on the market for more. And 35 applications later, it's like, I should have asked for more.
That's insane.
And that's Kansas City right now.
Which is insane.
And it's everybody, too. It's not just Kansas City, but
Kansas City isn't supposed to operate this way.
no.
Right? This is supposed to be a cheap place to live.
No, it's just everybody like, everything's fine. We're good. Everything's
Yeah.
good.
See?
Nothing to worry about here.
This is why we need a recession.
Yep.
I strongly advocate. Who
You liberal douche.
who among the presidential candidates is openly calling for a recession? They have my vote.
None
Let's
of them.
do it.
The
Bill
Democrats.
Maher
The
is.
Democrats,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah.
They won't. They won't so bad.
Well,
Yeah.
they want one for electionary
They'll win.
purposes.
Yeah.
They'll win in 2020. Yeah.
Yeah, they want a
'Cause
Jimmy
they'll win.
Carter kind of thing going
Because
on.
they'll
Right,
win.
right.
They'll win. Yeah.
That's called a reverse Jimmy Carter.
They might win anyway,
That
but
sounds like a sexual maneuver, by the way.
a recession. They'll win for sure for recession,
Yeah,
Yeah.
to reverse-
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, well,
Because Trump has nothing to stand
which
on.
I'm fine
if
with.
the
Which I'm fine
economy.
with. I'm fine if there's a recession and
Oh,
that
God,
gets
I'm
him
not
out
fine
of,
with it.
gets him out of it. I'm fine. Like
I'm not fine with the recession.
That
I
man
get
is a
I get the
lunatic.
mentality.
That man's a lunatic.
I know. Like I
Also
don't I
recession-
didn't fucking vote for him. I'm
Also,
not defending
recession.
him.
Selfishly, it's that would screw me, and I don't have a secure job, and I need
get
something.
It.
You can
I
come live
know.
in my unfinished basement. It'll be fine.
I actually, is there
I've
enough
seen
space
your
on there to make it
unfinished
into an
basement.
in-law kind of basement?
It's more
Maybe,
of a
yeah.
do you want to die tomorrow kind of unfinished basement, I think, isn't it? Is it nice?
No.
No, see, there you go.
Okay.
But the gunshots at night are
Yeah,
fantastic.
yeah.
The neighborhood's great. It's on its way up. You
Every
got a coffee
single-
house.
Every single time I drive to your house or to that neighborhood, like when we went to Rieger, it was like Rieger is a beautiful building. It's amazing.
It's
fantastic.
awesome. Yeah.
I cannot say enough about that building. Every single time I drive past that particular intersection,
Yeah.
like,
I like Kory's neighborhood. So.
Wait, yeah. The
no,
neigh-
it's a nice
Yeah,
neighborhood,
it's
but
like
the
really-
way GPS fucking takes me.
Yeah, no, it took me. Yeah,
It's-
had some sketch places today. But I don't care.
It is.
Right?
It is a
I don't give
great
shit.
neighborhood, but it's.
I just don't want you guys to die.
We're not. I don't think we're gonna die.
You're not. You're fine.
But it is, and this sort of gets back to like that discussion earlier. Is that we are gentrifiers, and we live in a neighborhood that's probably half gentrifier, and so the community is half gentrified.
Yeah.
But then next to it, there are neighborhoods that are 0% gentrified, and a lot of the conflict that happens between these two groups is that expectation of what people, it's like we regularly will drive down Independence Avenue here in Kansas City, and it'll be like, what the fuck is wrong with these people? Get off the curbside, go get yourself in a drug rehab program, like get your shit figured. Like, don't you want more out of life than this?
Yeah, and then you're like, Wait, what drug rehab program can we get into?
Yeah.
Oh, and it's like, oh, things aren't that easy.
No, things aren't that easy, and also, I don't know. It's a weird. It's weird because you look, a lot of times living in our neighborhood, I feel like the textbook version of the 1910s progressives who were trying to impose this middle class lifestyle on everybody in America, and it was very waspy idea of what life should be like.
You're not talking about Teddy, are you?
I hate progressives.
No.
So yeah,
Teddy's
one of them.
Teddy's
yeah.
one of them for
God
sure.
damn it.
I hate progressives.
But it's like, I understand sort of where they're coming from now in a way that I didn't before because I live in the middle of the city and there's decay everywhere, and you're like, why won't you people just figure this out? And so I get it, but on the other hand, it is like I do the same thing. If I stop and think about it, I'm like, I'm just as bad as they were. I'm no better.
No.
Because I'm imposing this idea of what everybody else should be doing based on my own life experience and life trajectory and goals in life, and they're not adhering to my expectations of what our neighborhood should be like, and then that pisses me off. And that's not really fair, especially for the people who've been there a hell of a lot longer than I've been there.
Yeah.
It's a very, very strange socioeconomic situation that goes on when you're on those border communities.
Yeah, it's ugly.
Yeah. Well, it's ugly, and it's one of those things that you want to face the truth, and you think that, like, I'm going to face the truth, and we're going to talk about this, we're going to be honest about it. The that documentary, I think the first time you came on the podcast, I was talking about the Our Divided City. It was about the Truce Divide.
Yeah.
One of the weirdest things about the documentary was they interviewed. It was somebody who had lived on the east side of 71 Highway for decades, and he was talking about. It's fine. There's IPA up there.
My beer.
I thought we had more beer. I think Nikki drank us out of beer. And, I just want to make sure that everybody knows that. But no, it was the weirdest thing because it was. I think it's called Our Divided City, but he was talking about like what destroyed that urban core area, and it was not something I expected. And it was a very strange moment because you're like, I'm not a terrible person. He's not a terrible person. We're just discussing this as intelligent people. It's like, what destroyed this community? And this man who had lived there for decades looked at the camera or looked at the individual that was talking to him and said, the end of segregation. It's
yeah.
like, oh, no. And I talked to the first person I had on the podcast. I asked Bob Kendrick from the Negro League Baseball Museum. I asked him about that. I was like, I don't want to sound like the idiot, dumb white guy in the room, but what do you think? And he was like, duh, what the fuck? Like the moment that you can go. And it was like, that's a weird moral argument. Like, that's a very strange situation to be in as somebody in our position, I'll say. Like, what? I mean, I'm just going to step out of this argument, but I have no idea what to say.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to get to the bottom of why some things on the east side of Kansas City are the way that they are, you can figure it out by simply asking the question of where does the black middle class live?
Exactly.
They live in Grandview.
Yep.
Oh, yep.
Right?
Yep. Yeah, right over there.
Again,
They live right over here.
back to class.
They live in Grandview. Right, class
You
separation.
have money or you don't.
More,
It's all about class.
Right, it's all about class. And so can I separate myself out from people who live a different lifestyle than me, that don't have the same class identity, that don't have the same sort of way of constructing their identity in the world? Yeah, I can, and I can surround myself with people who will understand in the same way, and so I'm going to do that. And so what you have with the end of segregation is basically segregation in the city by class.
Yep.
Right? And this
totally, yeah.
And that's one of those things that was always so weird for me. So growing up in a super diverse community in California, like racism never really made all that much sense to me, because it was kind of like in our neighborhood, it was like, well, we're all different races, but we're all poor, and like that was.
Well, and you made that comment on the last podcast about like what poor doesn't matter what color you are, have in
You're
common.
poor.
That's right.
Yeah, you're poor.
you're
I grew up
poor.
in Montana and Topeka. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're poor.
Yeah. Poor.
And
We're
so
poor. Yeah.
life struggles are all kind of the same, right? At the end of the day,
Basically,
it's that we have different ways of sort of structuring our poor lives, but basically, it all boils down to being poor.
Yeah.
The very moment that you had the end of segregation in Kansas City, the black middle class moves out
Yeah.
of those traditional black neighborhoods
Because the better schools are
because
the white.
better schools,
Exactly, yep.
Near the white, not in the white. They're near enough. 'Cause
stable property values.
Even the middle class blacks can't live in the white neighborhoods.
Right. So you have everybody moves, right?
Yeah.
And what that leaves behind is people who don't have the economic resources necessary to maintain the stability of their neighborhoods, which leads to all sorts of other
No
issues.
tax base.
And no tax base. And now in Kansas City, right, you've got white people moving back into those neighborhoods and gentrifying them, but then that causes all sorts of other problems.
Right. Yeah. So reason why when I was teaching, getting back to being a cultural historian, I would talk about the black middle class in like the 20s and the 30s.
Yeah.
About racial uplift.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, like, materially, they were not technically middle class. They still made less money than the white middle class.
Right.
But they had college educations. They
Nuclear
had families, right? And so
That's an interesting. You
But
brought that up as a
they
differentiator.
never made as much money as their white middle class counterparts, and never would have. But
Right.
they adopted the values of the cultural values of it, religious and cultural values.
Yeah.
So it's why again that class is. It's
Yep.
social historians say there's working class values. It's like no,
Right.
not.
Right.
Yep.
It's also middle class values are also like those things exist, but it's like not tied to economics or what kind of job you had. Because there were people at Target. One guy told me he made $83,000 last year. It's like that is like upper middle class.
Yeah, no
Yeah.
doubt.
That's not blue collar. It's
Right.
$83,000
Yeah, for
a year, but he's working a warehouse job. He's not a manager. He drives a forklift. He stacks boxes, and economically, he's making more money than most white collar people I know. But
Right.
he's still no college education.
Yep.
He owns property in California. So he makes a lot of money, right? He's
Yeah.
wealthy,
Right.
And but he's blue collar, and he has he has white collar values, right? He's just Y class is so interesting and complicated,
Yeah.
and I mean it depends. I think it's race and then class. Within races, class matters the most, but as far as broader power structures, it's still race.
Do you think there's and I don't know, I'm probably not smart enough to actually have any explanation of what this is, but do you think the fact that the United States of America is kind of the we always call ourselves the melting pot, even though right now it doesn't seem like we really appreciate that? I mean, that has to have some repercussion on what these things are.
Totally.
Yeah, I mean, we're one of the
Well,
we're the first
Yeah.
country to try to be like, yeah, everybody can get along, figure it out.
it's a melting pot of whiteness,
Yeah, 63% or something like
but
that.
it's not a melting pot for everything else, right?
Yeah.
And so
Right.
So there's
even some of those white people weren't white.
right, and
Right.
that's and
Until
that's
like the 20s, basically, or 30s. It's like, oh, the New Deal doesn't benefit black people. Oh yeah, you're Italian. You're white now because
Yep.
you have light skin.
and that's one of those
You're
things
Irish. Yeah, you're kind of white now.
that is so interesting
Here's a
about
gun,
American.
go fight in the Civil War.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
At least you don't
Well,
have
yeah,
black skin.
that's exactly what one of the most fascinating things about America is how whiteness is defined and how that changes over time.
Yep.
I'm as Irish as can be. My family would definitely have not been considered white. Really up until well after the Civil War. Right? Italians really aren't considered white until early in the 20th century.
Yeah, it's not until the 60s when they get protected status.
Right.
In
So
the 60s.
this idea of whiteness.
Oh, hold on. I want to hit
Yeah.
on that.
Mhm.
What?
So there's a book that I know Kory doesn't like very much. I think it's okay. No, it's got a lot of problems. Minority Rights Revolution.
I don't want to talk about this book, but
The basic argument is not
going.
wrong, right? The basic argument is not wrong.
it's wrong, but it's fine.
It's not. It's not. So basically, that. So
I want to hash this out, so you guys are going to debate this like crazy.
In the wake of the 1965 Civil Rights Act, is that you don't have like so-called white ethnics saying, "Oh, we've also experienced discrimination, so we should get protected status too." And so it was kind of going through what groups should be protected, which groups shouldn't be protected.
Mm-hmm.
They would say, "Is this like blacks? Right? Is this like them?" And so Jewish Americans, right, became protected. Italian Americans did like English, right?
So this is in the 60s?
Yeah, yeah.
A famously lovely
My last
decade.
name is Root, right, which is English. Is that I'm not gonna. They're not gonna add the English Americans to Civil Rights Acts, but Italian Americans, Jewish Americans, Irish, Eastern European, right? Oh yeah, no, we've had discrimination too, and so give us protection. It's like, well, you're white, you don't need it, and so, but it was how whiteness has changed.
Yeah. I mean that.
So
part
what's
is
your
sort
side, Kory?
Well,
It's not Kory. I don't think we disagree with the fundamental argument, but it's just I'm sure ends up being the same issues with the book. Then
but it's just it doesn't matter.
it's not wrong. Though.
But yeah, so the conception of whiteness has changed over time in interesting ways, and that the fact that whiteness has changed indicates that our perceptions of some of these things change,
Mm-hmm.
and that in and of itself is sort of indicative of the difficulty that we have as a nation with understanding ideas of ethnicity, right? But it does change, and even growing up in California, people are always sort of amused to hear me say like, well, there's definitely a hierarchy of race, and that the way that sort of worked, there was even deviation within certain Asian ethnic groups.
Oh yeah,
right. And so people would be like, no, especially here. People are like, no, that's weird. Like, no, you would know back home. You would know,
No.
right? And so, but ethnicity remains this sort of challenge for us as a culture, as a democracy, because some people are in and some people are out. And that's just the way that it is.
What an interesting thing for a nation that defines itself as a melting pot.
Right. Well, we melt some people.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly.
But other people aren't allowed into the melt.
Yeah.
yeah.
Some people have to remain separated. Some people are seen as a danger to democracy.
Well, we're going through that like crazy right now.
Right.
Because there are certain, we'll call them no-fly zones.
Sure.
Most
Brown
of them.
people.
Brown
Basically.
people. right,
Well,
Brown
basically.
people. Yeah.
Specifically from the Middle East.
Yes. Yeah. Well, in Mexico and Guatemala
and South America,
yeah.
Central America.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
So those people are sort of, we want to collectively hold them out of the body politic without ever actually having a discussion about why we are and what we're doing.
Yeah,
but
because we know.
at the same time, that's an American tradition.
Yeah. No, it is. Yeah.
And the
No, I think that's always been an American tradition.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Totally. Yeah. It's yeah.
And
Which
also a tradition is that the last group in to the melt, for lack of a better word, always tries to pull the ladder up on the next group coming in.
Go through that.
No, they want to keep the next group out.
Yeah, they pull the ladder up.
Oh,
keep
pull.
them out.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah,
Pull
absolutely.
the ladder out.
So
yeah.
when the Irish became white,
I
quote
thought you said
unquote,
help them up the
sorry,
ladder. I'm like,
no.
No
When the
way.
Irish became white, their arch nemesis suddenly became Italians.
Yeah.
Well, we're in. We don't want you to be in. We're going to keep you out. We see the same. There. It is interesting to me.
I think
that,
the Italians won on that.
well, eventually there's always a shift,
Yeah.
right? The it's super telling that some of the most conservative, one of the most conservative ethnic groups in America on the issue of immigration is Cubans.
Yep. Yeah.
Right? They're just repeating this pattern that we see over and over and over again of newly accepted ethnic groups pulling the ladder up and not letting in the next group.
Yeah. And that's unfortunate because I love Cubans
Hmm.
for everything they are and bring.
Well, I remember a teacher I had once saying that we needed to have a war in this country because our food was getting stale.
Hmm.
And that was the idea that if you fight a war with somebody, there's always going to be immigrants that end up coming to your country from that country. And then you get to incorporate their culinary traditions into your culinary landscape.
That's a weird thing. Like,
But
that might
it's
be the most
true.
quintessentially like war profiteering thing ever. Like,
Absolutely, right?
my chips are getting stale. We got to start a fucking war.
Yeah, absolutely. But it makes sense, though, right? If you think about it.
That's terrifying.
I don't get it.
So, like, you fight a war
Yeah.
with somebody, and then you get to enjoy their cuisine.
Like starting a war for oil.
Because there'll be immigrants, and those immigrants will start
But
restaurants.
how many of you go eat Iraqi and Afghani food?
Well, it didn't really work out with Iraqi and Afghani food, but certainly it did with Korean and Vietnamese, and
Yeah, yeah.
their food's delicious.
Or Native American. You don't eat Native American food.
That's
Yeah, because we just took it over.
maybe that's
Like a buffalo.
maybe that's too wide a spectrum.
might be. Yeah.
Have you guys heard Louis C.K.'s joke about Indians?
No.
I know he's not in the.
Louis
in-
C.K.
I feel like I'm about to get fired.
Louis C.K. is not funny or talented. So,
Okay.
yep. I'm gonna drop that.
Fair enough. We can move on.
We can. Yep.
Dave Chappelle.
Dave Chappelle is funny.
Yeah.
I like Dave Chappelle. Yeah.
Yep. I mean, but he might not be right now.
I haven't seen the new special. So
I haven't either.
I don't stand up is not. I don't like stand up. So.
Oh,
it's-
really?
Nah, it's okay.
That's fine.
I like some of it, but it's also like,
I
I can
always.
take it or leave it.
That's fine.
Yeah.
No, I always appreciate somebody that can go up in front of a large crowd with stuff that they created and make people laugh.
No, it's a skill.
Yeah.
I
And-
realize that this is a opinion that's falling out of favor, but I actually think there's something for stand up that makes you uncomfortable.
Yeah, I
It's
think
supposed to be.
I think
Supposed
that's
to be
the point.
uncomfortable, right? Yeah, it's
It's
supposed
what
to be
comedy's supposed to do.
it's supposed to be funny
Yeah.
because it's talking about things that you don't talk about.
It's
Yeah.
what comedy's
Right.
supposed to do.
Yeah,
right?
you're not comfortable at all, but
Comedy's supposed
you
to
make it happen. Yeah.
Comedy's supposed to make you uncomfortable.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
I
It's
think
not
that's
funny if it's not.
100%. Well, let's talk about research.
Oh boy.
Do we want to take a drink for a bit, or do we
Is
want
there
to
any more-
take a break?
Is there any more
Take a
beer?
break?
Yeah.
If not, we can go get some and come right back.
We might need a beer break.
I need another
Alright.
beer. Yeah.
All right, let's do it. Hold on. Say something funny, guys.
What
Jesus.
time is it? I don't know. That's not funny, but what time is it, Kory?
So I tend to stay.
We are live. Just saying.
Yeah. Thank you for the heads up.
You're welcome. But yeah, you can. I can. Go ahead though.
I put on a few LBs lately, so
I don't want to hear it.
When you're,
I don't want to hear it.
yeah. As I sit here, just like looking at the
Exactly.
fat on this
That
rib,
looks
like,
delicious.
oh my
Yeah.
god.
The rib was really good.
Yeah,
though.
it's gonna be like the way that I eat ribs is embarrassing. Like I feel like a fat guy around vanilla ice cream.
so good.
Like just I can't do anything else but
Well,
that.
nothing will be as embarrassing as your fantasy draft this week, so go for it.
Yeah, how's my team doing though? Just
Yeah,
wondering.
Exactly.
Yeah, Kory, how's it
week,
going?
week 1 does not make a team.
Nah.
No, but it's still going pretty well. So let's talk about research.
Yeah, you can for a little bit. Yeah. So I'm working on a book and about Oral Roberts. You know, he's a famous pastor or I guess evangelist from Tulsa, and so let me tell you about this. So a couple weeks ago, I went down to Tulsa to do research at the Oral Roberts University, and I don't know. It was a successful trip. I'm also not 100% clear or sure I made the best choices when I was down there. So
You mean like you found yourself in bed with a male prostitute?
no.
Or
We're not
Like,
We're
talking
talking-
about
something like that.
Pittsburgh,
What
gentlemen. We're talking
yeah, I'm not.
What kind of choices are we talking about here?
It's not Pittsburgh. No, no. So the manuscript is due May 2020, and I'm about halfway done. You know, it's spoiler alert. It's hard working full time. and writing a book, and finding time to hang out with family and friends, find time to exercise,
Do a podcast.
and a podcast now.
Sure.
Right? So coming up with a podcast, taking time to relax and exercise, write a book, and work full time. But there's some stuff that I wanted to see down at Oral Roberts University, and I don't know how much I could get it. And I went down there, and a lot of it was the student newspaper I wanted to see. And so, well, the first thing was newspapers, local from Tulsa, which is hard to find online.
Really?
And and so it's like I got to go down there and get newspapers from these years, right? I got to have these years, and the main years was early Oral Roberts, kind of on the ground look, because the newspaper. So
what years would we be talking about?
So
just to place this?
Really what I wanted was 61.
Okay.
When he first announces the university, through about 68 for newspapers. Because the 65 stuff, especially 63 and 65, the Tulsa papers were doing an on-the-ground look that's like, hey, this week he raised this much money. Next week he raised this much money. And that's what I needed. So I went down there, and they had newspaper clippings that were already photocopied, but out of order. It's like 1964 there was no order to it. And I was like, I don't have time to organize this. I don't have time to scan everything in this folder that was thick, maybe a couple hundred pages. And it's like, I don't have time to go through and pick out what I need. And so I did 2 days of newspaper photocopying, which ended up being a good idea, I think. And after that, I wanted a student newspaper. Well, it ends up the university, ORU, also wants the student newspaper digitized. And so I'm like, I only have 3 days of this. I only have 3 days to digitize or scan what I want from the student newspaper. But if I scan every issue, I'll be helping them, and they'll help me later on.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so it was like, I scanned every issue from 66 until about 79, and there's stuff that it's like I need stuff later, right? So I can't afford to go back. I might have to, simply because I can't stop using the student newspaper in 1979.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, this professor or this historian uses this source until then. Well, the source still exists for the next 30 years.
Right.
Why'd they stop? And so I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't know. We'll see. I may have to go back. At this point, it's trying to work full time, trying to write a book, and everything else has been incredibly difficult.
One of the things I think probably people who aren't historians don't realize is that historical research can be very tedious. And one of the things that can make it so tedious is if the archive is privately owned, then...
Which in this case it is.
Yeah. Then they can decide who has access to what and have some... once you get it and leave...
That's
really,
better, but if they know what your point is...
If they know what you're going after. And in Root's case, he has a pretty critical view of Oral Roberts in some places.
I do, yeah.
And so I know that one of the things he's been worried about is that if his access to those archives would someday be cut off because of that point of view.
Which might happen.
So he's kind of racing against the clock in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Which this podcast may not.
I was going to say, should I delay
As
this
I say,
podcast?
yeah, talking about this is not going to help.
Right.
That's okay. I don't know if they'll listen. No, but it's tricky because, I did like 15 years of the student newspaper, 8 hours a day, just scanning weekly issues.
Oh, man.
And not everything got sent. Everything got sent in the email.
Yeah.
But I'm finding tons of great stuff. But it's also one of those things that I got to get this done by May 2020. And it's it was because it was an incredibly difficult decision, which one, thank God for modern technology.
Oh yeah.
Because I can imagine if this had been 10 years ago, I'd been like, nah, I'm sorry, fuck you. You want this scanned? Scan it. I'm just gonna photocopy what I need.
Right, for sure.
Yeah, in many ways, this is without question the best time to be alive.
Big time.
Yeah, as historians, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, so much of our research, like Root's clearly butthurt by the fact that Tulsa newspapers haven't been digitized yet.
Yeah, I have too many sources.
That's rare.
Yeah,
right?
it
Like
is. Yeah,
now
yeah,
it's
yeah.
like everything.
Well, the thing is that after eventually, so this is not here or there, but eventually the Tulsa newspapers were so friendly that it's like I don't need them. And so at some point, I think I got what I needed from the Tulsa papers. After that, I'll just go to the national wires, like the Post, the Times, other websites like newspapers.com, which has tons of stuff digitized. If it ran in Tulsa in 1985, the exact same article ran in Chicago in 1985.
That does kind of surprise me that the Tulsa papers from that time period aren't digitized, because I mean, like
some are sporadically, but not the Tulsa Tribune, which is the main. The Tribune is the main one. It's not online yet.
That's really weird.
And I don't have time to go through and do, which goes back to being a grad student and teaching.
Right.
Trying to write a dissertation is, I should have been doing the Tulsa Tribune microfilm.
Right.
But teaching a lot.
But instead you were getting drunk in afternoons at the Heidelberg.
Even counting that. Can you imagine going through? So Oral Roberts, why I've been so hard is he opens his ministry or starts kind of a permanent home in Tulsa in 1947. Dies in 2009. So I'm looking at, what is that, 47 to 69? 09 is what, 59 years?
Sure.
54 years, 55 years? Almost 60 years of newspapers, which comes out daily.
Right.
40s, you still have morning and evening editions.
Right.
So I'll have to go through morning, evening editions for 50, almost 60 years.
Thousands of paper with no index.
And no index, just doing microfilm.
You can't do that.
So I had no
That's
time.
Insane.
So now it's like, I got to have this. And really, it's stuff I already knew, but I just want to be able to go to the primary source and say, oh, yeah, this person was right before.
Right.
When you come away with that, I mean, obviously you're still putting everything together, but like, what have you come away with? That's and not giving too much away, but what's the? There's got to be something that you're just kind of looking at the entire time, going, this is interesting.
Yeah. So it's actually a good question to ask right now, because I'm now in the part where Oral Roberts was a famous Tulsa pastor, preacher, evangelist, whatever you want to call him. He starts a university in 1965. And what's interesting about Oral Roberts starting his university, this is one thing that I'm working on now, is in a lot of ways, if not most ways, it's what many, if not most Americans, especially American evangelicals, wanted in 1960. It was a university that had a strict moral code, but was still striving for intellectual respectability. I had a lot of Ph.D.s who were hired early on, which 1965, to be a Pentecostal charismatic, to be a Ph.D. who admitted you spoke in tongues, right? You're going to find almost none.
Right.
But they were stacked of Ph.D.s from UCLA, Harvard. You had PhDs from Stanford going to ORU in 65. So you have a university in a lot of ways was living up to what people wanted with its strict moral code, no drinking, no smoking, dress code, which still survives today. You had certain lifestyle requirements as far as your weight, right? You had you had to. You might have been okay. It depends what your body fat was.
You just couldn't be.
What your body fat was.
I'm working on it.
And so,
which way?
You had all these requirements, but so a lot of people say, "Hey, this is awesome." 1960s, you have Berkeley is losing their minds. University of Michigan is losing their minds. College kids are bad. They're rebelling against these things. So ORU is like a beacon of hope. But what's interesting about ORU is many if not most Christian schools started in the 50s and the 60s were explicitly segregationist, right? Because they're private. It's like, oh, wait, we have to have black kids here? I don't think so. ORU in Tulsa, Oklahoma was integrated from the beginning. They had Black Awareness Week from the very beginning.
That's I would have never expected that.
By the late 60s, by the early 70s, they had Multicultural Month. Jesse Jackson comes to ORU to talk. You have
You're making this shit up.
no, right? No, it's not. So what's so interesting is you have this school that is like kids in the 60s are bad.
Yep.
Right? They're banging each other, doing drugs, drinking, causing problems, rebelling.
Also known as every university now.
Yeah. Even at, well, I don't want to take this part out. But ORU is the same way. I met at a barbecue joint in Tulsa a guy from way north of Topeka, from Meriden, Kansas. He owned a pot shop in Tulsa because they have medical marijuana now in Oklahoma.
Oh.
And he owned a liquor store by ORU, and he was like, "Dude, ORU is like everyone has a fake ID at ORU. Take that out. I don't want that. I don't want people to hear that."
Hold on, give me 1 second.
Okay.
Now I know
So
where
anyway,
it is.
yeah. So
That's not
it's
coming
this
out.
super conservative. They're not going to listen to this. All right. They're this super conservative university, but when it comes to race, like they had a black student body president in like
Really?
the 60s. Yeah. It was a unanimous vote that
That's
he was.
crazy.
Yeah. And they had all these like forward-thinking ideas on. I mean, Oral was also still a white guy from Oklahoma and born in 1918. So every now and then he would say things that were like, "Bro, you can't say that. Right? You just shouldn't be saying that." But still, I mean, it was totally forward-thinking, and so it totally goes against a lot of what you'd expect. And so the reason why I think Oral is interesting is Oral Roberts is interesting, not just Oral. Oral Roberts is. No one's left with the sex joke. Come on, come on, right?
Dude, you shut me down to Louis C.K. I wasn't saying
Yeah.
shit for a second.
Yeah.
I was so enraptured by what
Yeah,
you were saying.
So something about Oral Roberts is he is so one reason why I was drawn to Oral Roberts and kind of prosperity gospel stuff, and kind of consumer culture is that
Can you?
Oh, they.
So, wait. Okay,
Or
go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Let
You're
the
gonna say it
actual
better.
host.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, could you
Fuck
just
that.
like one sentence? What's the prosperity gospel?
Thank you.
Obviously,
yeah,
I know what it
it's-
is, but
it's the idea that God wants you to be, or the sign of salvation is being happy, healthy, and wealthy, and they can earn that through a transaction. So I think Oral Roberts, with the key to because if you ask most Christians, right, does God want his Christian to be happy? It's like yes, right.
Sure.
The prosperity gospel it's not wrong that God wants people to be happy, right? He wants people to be happy, but prosperity gospel I think adds the transaction element to it. That if I give money, then I'll
you
be
sow what
happy.
you reap.
Yeah, right, yeah. And
Yeah,
so,
so if I give you $10, I will be rewarded therefore by
you'll be
100.
awarded $20,
Right,
right?
yep.
Or you'll be awarded endless happiness.
Yep.
So it adds that kind of transactional element. It adds that transactional part to it. So anyway, so what Oral was doing was, so what I was interested in prosperity gospel is that they are conservatives, right? Politically they're conservative, economically they are, socially they are, and also theologically, but it's not something they ever really talked about.
Well, and
Like
it's-
Oral Roberts was a lifelong Democrat, right? He was a Democrat his entire life. Granted, that was like Oklahoma Democrat,
Right,
So,
right.
but still, it's one of those things that still, he was a lifelong Democrat, and so Oral even said, someone's like, "Dude, why don't you run for office?" He's like, "I know I could, and I would win. I could be governor of Oklahoma with no problem, but it's not what I'm interested in. Right? It's not
Sure.
important to me." And so I think that when it comes down to shaping, and why I like Oral Roberts in these, or why I'm so interested is that when it comes down to it, is that Oral Roberts, by talking about consumerism the way he does, and something that Kory and I have talked about, kind of therapeutic gospel stuff, therapeutic culture, is that he did more to shape modern evangelicalism way more than like Jerry Falwell.
Really?
Yeah, because most evangelicals are not, most Americans are not that kind of doctrinaire conservative.
Mm-hmm.
What does shape American Christianity, what shapes American culture more than anything else than political, like, conservatism, whatever, with the Falwell, it's consumerism,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's the capitalist idea of the good life. And that's what it's impossible to escape.
Yep.
Consumerism, consumption. You can put yourself in a bubble with liberal and conservative, and again, most people are not the doctrinaire conservatives that Falwell is. But so I think that Roberts is interesting because he, in many ways, I think exemplifies a lot of majority views on, at least in the 60s and 70s when he was so popular, even in the 80s, kind of proper social values and moral conduct. But politically, it's like, oh yeah, okay, just not that. It just was not that important to them. Whereas the political stuff of Falwell and them matters way more to them than it does to most people, because that's what I thought when I teach is that, even if Reagan being elected, most Americans now then do not want to get rid of the social safety net. Right. They're fine with some kind of government welfare.
Yeah.
They're cool with it, right? They, oh yeah, no, that should exist.
No, I have a job, therefore unemployment benefits are bad.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But
But oral
the
of them,
moment
that's
you
not
don't.
something. I think they recognize that. Listen, most people don't.
Yeah.
This is not that important to most people.
So Oral Roberts,
But
wouldn't
Oral
have,
wasn't. He was conservative, right? Totally. He'd be like, oh yeah, no, I am a free market capitalist.
but he wouldn't have been interested in that moral majority
Not
shit
at all.
that happens
No,
in the
no.
80s and the 90s.
But his
That's
school,
interesting.
his school was built on that, right? His school was
right.
his school was built on bringing God back into the education. But he bucks the trend when it comes to what was taught at the schools. And so I came across a thing, and so I'm going to work on it for the next chapter. So I got to get
My
working on
brain
this
is
shit.
going 1,000
Is
miles
that
an hour.
he had professors at the school in biology who believed in evolution. Right?
Holy shit.
there was a
Seriously.
debate like in the 60s or 70s when it was you had Six-Day Creationists. Not shockingly, they were not scientists.
Yeah.
Who were the Six-Day Creationists.
Right.
But you had
I like magic too.
scientists who were like, well, we don't believe in six-day creation. But we don't believe in evolution either, right? Clearly, the Earth is literal 6 days is not possible, right? It's just not.
Yeah.
One, that's not the categories they would have talked in ancient history.
Right.
And two, it's like that's simply not the way it works. But you had scientists at the school saying, "Oh no, man, evolution is that." The scientific evidence for evolution is overwhelming, right? You can't deny it. I can believe in a creator God and be an evolutionist. You had like political debates. You had liberal and conservative having debates at the campus. And so it was this place, this Christian university that still most of the students were conservative, right? But still it is this school that is trying to be something totally different. And in many ways, it might have been one of the most countercultural schools in the country.
Yeah.
That's insane.
If not the most counter, because it is, like, on race, it's so progressive.
Right.
But it's like social values, like, you know.
So to this
It never banned interracial dating or anything.
to this day, would you describe? I mean, I really don't know anything about Oral Roberts other than twice a year they kick the shit out of on my alma mater's basketball team.
Yeah.
But
That's nothing to the basketball team, yeah.
is Oral Roberts to this day still? I'm sure it's still culturally very conservative, as you've described. But
It is,
the
yeah, yeah.
education still ensconced in that liberal tradition?
That's where it gets tricky. I don't feel confident of saying either way. You have some.
But so after Oral Roberts dies, there's at least some questioning of that liberal foundation.
Oh, even when he was still alive. Yeah.
Oh,
So
interesting.
I'm not totally clear on this story, but a professor in the theology school who was at ORU wrote a book called A Different Gospel, which was anti-prosperity gospel.
Interesting.
And so
That couldn't have gone over well.
I mean, if I remember right, he was never fired or anything for it. Oral, of course, was upset. If I remember right, Oral, of course, was upset, but was also like,
It
you
was
know.
like, homie had tenure, so what
But
are you going to do?
even the student newspaper, you had people making fun of Oral's fundraising methods.
Interesting.
Yeah, so the student newspaper, again, most of it was like most universities, right? I mean, Harvard is going to be pretty monoculture, right? Same
Oh,
with
yeah. I
Berkeley.
mean, yeah.
I mean, you're going to get those people who have different views, but ORU was like, oh no. So what Oral said, and I came across this just yesterday, is that, we can't deny truth. That no matter what truth we come to with scientific discoveries, they'll never trump God's truth, right? And so we're going to have people here who talk to you about evolution, right? Oral wasn't a scientist,
What a wonderful religious argument that is.
Yeah, right.
Like, honestly, like
ultimately, it's like
it's not going to trump God's truth. Well,
evolution,
but it says this in this book. It's like, yeah, bitch,
evolution
but we had
may
this.
very well be real.
Yeah,
right? But it's also like this university is built to discover that.
Yeah,
to talk about it.
Yeah.
Oral himself was never lived in evolution. I think he was smart enough that if he had read the evidence and actually studied, he'd be like, oh yeah, no, this is totally compatible. But he would never would have said that those things were incompatible.
He was the most progressive evangelical in the history.
But in a lot of ways, he wasn't. In a lot of ways, he was totally backwards.
Oh,
right?
really?
In a lot of ways,
okay.
yeah. I mean, it would depend on what was happening at the moment, how he would revert to his old style versus trying to be more accepted in the broader culture. So he could, if his back against the wall, he knew his most loyal supporters were hardcore Pentecostals. And so he would rely on the hardcore old school Pentecostal when he needed to.
I've
but
got some family members.
when he didn't want to do that or didn't have to, he didn't.
Right.
And so it would depend on his, because in '68 he becomes a Methodist.
They're the fun ones. They're the fun ones.
Yeah,
though.
yeah. And he leaves again. He's kicked out of the Methodist Church in like '87. And goes back to being a hardcore Pentecostal because like, oh yeah, this is not really working out for me. So let's be a hardcore Pentecostal again.
God damn it.
No, he was an interesting guy. He never finished high school even. He had to do basically the GRE. GED. Yeah, he did the GED. Yeah, because he was not a veteran, and so the GED was invented after World War II.
Okay.
Yeah, and he never finished high school. It's like, oh yeah, you can just take this test that veterans are taking to get into college.
Yeah.
So he took the GED, and that's so interesting. Yeah, and so he. Yeah,
there is so much shit I don't know.
This is not stuff that many listeners may know, but understand. But he could read like these dense theologians like Karl Barth, Paul Tillich. These are basically German theologians, which is notoriously dense and difficult.
Anything in German is gonna be hard. Yeah.
He could read the translation and be like, "Oh yeah, no, I understand German theology," and just talk about it for hours.
Interesting.
You just eat it up. But no, he's a fascinating guy. He's kind of a dick a lot of times, but also at times like, nah, dude, this guy was smart. Like he knew what he was doing.
Well, anybody that intelligent has to come out kind of like a dick, though.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're so far above everybody,
so
you're gonna come off sounding like an asshole.
Yeah, he was so smart.
Yeah.
Well, but he was not. But I mean, he got ridiculed, right? Because he was a Pentecostal.
Right.
He never had a college degree. Never had a Ph.D.
My mind is completely blown.
Yeah, no, he did. Yeah, no, he's reading the Christian existentialists in the 60s and 70s.
Jesus
and
Christ.
Understanding them.
That
right?
is,
He apparently understands in a way that most people, because the Christian existentialists are notoriously difficult to understand, but he could just read it and be like, oh yeah, no, I get it. I disagree, but I can break it down in a way that academics can.
It's interesting because I expected this story to be more in the archetype of like a Billy Graham. It's actually
no,
we were talking radically different.
So, no, it was one thing that I'm arguing is that why. So Billy Graham is a North Carolina Calvinist,
right?
Right. I mean, basically, he's from North Carolina. It's a New England Calvinist family. It's conservative, and it's kind of these things are done this way.
Right.
We're just going to kind of keep doing these things.
I am so sorry to do this, but because I know people will be listening to this, like just 2-sentence North Carolina Calvinist is.
Okay, so
this will be fun.
No, so we don't need to get into the theology. So the big difference would be is that. So back to kind of talking politics. So a way to talk about it to understand this divide is what I would suggest, one reason why Billy Graham was more into politics than Oral Roberts was, is that Billy Graham was of New England Puritan stock.
Okay.
And that brings with it a lot of class assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of that is this idea that Calvinists tend to have, at least I'll say this, I guess, we can put it this way, is that they had this idea that America has a special relationship with God. And in order to achieve that, we need to kind of meet certain moral and religious expectations. Otherwise, we'll lose that covenant.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of it comes down to covenant theology.
Mhm.
And Billy Graham always had a sense that in his kind of old style New England Puritans were like, oh, we got to save culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one way to do that is politics. And Roberts didn't disagree, right? He would say, oh, no, American culture, totally fucked up. Right? It is off the
Garbage
rails.
fire.
It's off the rails. People are disgusting. But politics,
But
we ain't going to save America through politics, right? So why even...
What an interesting thing.
why even get... I mean, he wasn't uninvolved. He was also just like, it's... You're going to change... So Roberts' thing is... His thing was, you're going to change culture through education,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mhm.
That's how you change a generation is how you teach, but also television.
Which is true, positive or negative.
And television,
Right.
right?
Oh.
And TV, right? Those two things, that is how you reach
But that-
people,
it's-
is those two. That's why in 69, he starts a new TV show, more of a variety show,
Yeah.
right? So it had like skits, it had him doing interviews. Like, listen, this is how we're going to reach people, is not electoral politics. Like, yes, you need to vote.
Oh, he
But
was so far ahead
you
of
vote
his time.
Republican, you vote Democrat. I don't give a
Well-
fuck. Do vote for whoever you want, but these are the things that are really going to change culture. It's not going to be electoral
That-
politics. If you do change things, it's local.
It's
Because he was so involved in Tulsa politics, so involved in Tulsa business that it's all local. Like, be involved in your local church,
man.
local Tulsa community, and that's how
that's
things are going to
so-
be improved and changed, is through your city
That's so
and not nationally necessarily.
fascinating. Because I hadn't really considered the role that Calvinism would play in modern evangelicalism. Because one of the things to note about Calvinism, or to go a little bit deeper in the theology than we probably need to, is that Calvinists fundamentally believe in the idea of predestination. You are the day you born, going to heaven or going to hell. Not much you can do to change it. However, your lifestyle
Mm.
becomes an outward reflection of your predestination.
That sounds like a terrifying, like, just life to live.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah,
I
no
enjoy
sh-
swimming.
Well, the difference
If
is
I'm
that
always going to go to hell, then swimming is terrible.
right. The difference is though is that you don't really ever know,
You don't know.
and so you're always looking for signs. And so
This is a terrifying mentality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's why that emphasis on politics becomes so important. If our politics is right, if we're doing things correctly, if we have a culture that is constructed in a godly way, then our culture is outwardly reflecting the fact that we can be saved.
Yeah, and I mean, again, it comes down to covenant theology.
Right.
Like God enters into covenants with certain groups and peoples, and
Right.
America has to be in a covenant theology of God, or covenant
Right.
agreement of God, and if we screw up, and Roberts wouldn't disagree necessarily, but he's also like, nah.
But
it's like, it's not the same
Pentecostalism
kind of thing.
de-emphasizes that Calvinistic.
They do, yeah.
So it's in the background, but it's not, it's not the primary motivating idea in how you arrange your life. Whereas
I
for
come
other
from a family of Pentecostals, and they terrify me.
for other strands of
It
just
changed
being
eventually.
honest.
It changed eventually.
Yeah.
Pentecostals, yeah. It changed eventually.
Okay. So,
It changed eventually,
so
yeah.
different generations of Pentecostals.
right,
Yeah, and those Pentecostals who are worried, a lot of it has to do with class changes, right?
Ah, gotcha.
it's affected by that Marxist theology. Or
Class
Marxist
changes. Class changes.
perspective as well.
And
You
so-
fucking historians
And so
are
the
frustrating as shit to me.
difference is that like Pentecostals, like Oral Roberts, most Pentecostals grew up poor,
right,
right? And you're poor. It's like, who is not helping you? The government.
right,
But if you are Billy Graham, this more or less comfortable middle class,
yeah,
it's like, oh yeah, no, we need to save the society because society has done us well. If you're a poor Oklahoma farmer, you're like,
Fuck society.
nah, right? That's not anything for me, right?
right,
And Roberts was, I think overemphasizes this, but he was 1/8 Cherokee.
Mm.
But he was still growing on time when it might have been a problem. But he had, dark hair, dark eyes.
yeah,
And so he's like, no, most things suck.
right,
This is not, like, you want to try and save it, but it's also that it's not going to, like, voting the right way is not salvific, right? Voting Republican is not equal salvation the way I think Billy Graham made it eventually. I mean, Graham after Nixon was kind of like, oh yeah, nah.
It works for
Well,
me.
right.
I was
right,
wrong,
right,
right? Nixon is a bad guy.
Now, Nixon historically has always been portrayed as a very good guy.
Speaking of which, when I was teaching, I changed my evals. I used to say in class, by the way, Nixon is my favorite president.
Yeah.
You know why? Because he's a dirtbag. He knows he's a dirtbag, and he acts like it. He also, Noam Chomsky was not wrong. He is our most liberal president.
I would
Noam
like
Chomsky
to
was right.
reserve the possibility of coming back for a future podcast to defend Richard Nixon's legacy.
No.
Me too.
I just was
I
taking.
will.
Yeah.
Fuck
Yeah,
you guys
I will.
because I was just taking a bite of rib. No, I had
I'll
a
defend
teacher that
Nixon.
had the exact same thing that you guys are saying
yeah.
right now.
I'll defend Nixon.
Yeah, no. And by the way, come back on any time. You will be without question.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Please do, for the love of God.
Yeah, now Nixon, dude, he...
No, I know he, Nixon's
Awful.
Nixon. There's no
Awful.
question.
Terrible
But
human being. Great
worst.
policy.
Yeah.
yes. Thank you for putting it
Yeah.
in 3 words where I was trying to eat rib and do this.
He
Fuck off, Kory.
created the EPA. He created, like...
Clean Water Act.
Clean water. The first
Clean Air Act.
disability rights.
Affirmative action.
Yeah, the first, like, disability rights
Yeah. That's
stuff. He wanted
the
to,
Republican
Section
Party,
8.
ladies and gentlemen.
He
Section 8
wanted-
housing.
actually, he wanted to create a universal basic income.
Yeah. He was totally into UBI.
I mean, he was also the absolute worst and was a racist, spiteful, angry man, but it's also like, nah,
He
a
hated
lot,
blacks and Jews.
a
like
lot of the
nobody.
stuff that we have, they recognize as being
It's because of
positive
Nixon.
goods. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and he's always looked at as this caricature of a human being, and it's like, no, you had it wrong. The caricature is that he was a good guy.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's just that he was a complete
Honest-
dick.
Honestly, considering everything that's gone
Fascinating.
down since he was president, would we even give a shit about Watergate?
I think we would just let that slide.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I'd just be impressed that a president who was clearly going to win took it so seriously that
Yes.
he'd break
Yeah.
into the
Which
other
is what
side.
I tell.
You know what I
Watch
mean?
a documentary
Like,
on it. It
yeah.
was just like, yeah, he was gonna win.
Like,
that's
it'll
the
walk.
worst part.
It'll
Yes.
walk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yet he did that.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
I
like, no.
love telling the students that you realize that he was going to win. He knew he
Oh,
was going
hands
to win.
down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was such a weirdo that
He was such a
He
weirdo.
had to confirm it. He had to.
Yeah,
It was
but
like, oh, no,
he-
we have to do it. We have to do it.
I love him.
I'm a fan of thoroughness.
Wait, say that again.
thoroughness.
Thoroughness. I thought you were saying like Henry
Thoreau.
David Thoreaus.
Who
No.
I hate.
Thoreau's a bitch,
I
but I'm a
hate
fan of
Henry Thoreau.
thoroughness.
But he has
Yeah.
one of the best quotes of mankind.
I mean,
men
assholes
live
can be
lives-
quotable. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
what
no,
to
he
tell
was
you.
a cunt, but
He was the worst. I hate Henry Thoreau.
no, but he had a great quote. It's most men live lives of quiet desperation.
Did you?
Wonderful quote.
It is a great quote.
Yes.
Did you know that the entire
No.
time he lived at Walden Pond, his mother did his laundry?
Yes, I
I
did know
just
that.
want to put that out there.
It was her property.
yeah, because it was her property.
And she brought
he wasn't squatting
and
in
she
the
brought
forest.
and she brought him sandwiches.
yeah,
And he
I'm
would
so happy
and
somebody
he would,
actually said
he would
it.
stumble in a town drunk because
Yeah.
the old ladies also fed him.
Thoreau
Yep.
is the very first millennial.
Yep. Hey, and yes, and also
Nah.
fuck off.
He had it easier than millennials. He had it way easier than millennials. Yeah, nah.
Maybe he was the first hipster. Maybe that'd be
First
the way to think
hipster,
That's
about
the
yes.
right
it.
thing.
He's
Yeah.
a-
yeah.
Hipster.
Also, the best
His bespoke cabin.
description of
That's an awesome
hipsters
term.
is the douchoisie.
Wait, say that one more
Well,
time.
it's- yeah.
Douchoisie, because hipsters that I
my
know,
God,
Oh, I
the
love
ones I
that.
know
Awesome.
who like do the hipster nonsense
You've got
are
to hashtag that, but
white-
nobody knows how to spell douche.
white
Or,
rich people.
or bourgeoisie.
And they're bourgeoisie,
no, it is,
right?
right?
But
Yeah.
they don't want to admit it, right? Because
Right.
they want to this
Right.
the douchoisie. I say, no, fuck you. You grew up super rich. That's why you can live this way.
On the other hand, hipsters, please continue to do what you do. I enjoy your food and your.
Yes, me too. Me too. me too.
cocktails.
Yeah, me too.
Avocado
Yeah.
toast.
No, it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, no.
I want to partake.
You know the way people don't want to live the way you hipsters do. That's why people.
Yeah, I don't
Figure
want to
better
roll into a
jobs.
coffee.
That's
house
my
with a
new favorite.
typewriter.
I think I'm gonna hashtag that term. on this
Douchoisie.
podcast.
Douchoisie.
Fuck
Douchoisie.
yeah.
Yeah,
Good
the
luck spelling
Yeah.
that.
I think I saw on
I'm not
Buzz-
going to.
I think
I'm
I saw
just
on
gonna guess.
BuzzFeed of all things a long time
Ah,
ago.
fuck.
The
Okay.
douchoisie. Yeah,
Makes sense.
it's accurate though.
No,
Oh,
it's
it's
100%
totally-
accurate.
Yeah. I've had
I'm
family.
so happy.
Don't
I
want to
got-
talk about family, but who
Well, you said they're not
lived
going
in,
to listen to this.
they probably won't know. They lived in like Colorado communes, and their father supported them. They got kicked out of those anarchist communes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Like, nah, that's the kind of shit. I was like, no.
Charlie,
You know what I don't want to do? Live like that.
there's a guy
Yeah,
named
no, I hear
Manson
that.
that kind of
Ever
started
again.
in something like that, and that's terrifying.
Yeah. Speaking of which, have you seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
It is
I haven't.
Awesome.
such an amazing movie.
So
Until
the
the
only thing
end-
I've heard is that they portrayed Bruce Lee as a tool,
Which
and
was-
I'm a
He
little
is a total
frustrated.
Which is
tool in the
apparently
movie.
true.
Yeah, apparently it is an
That
accurate
Bruce
representation.
Lee grew
Yeah,
up, he grew up apparently a little rich piece of shit, right? And was mean to people. And
I'm gonna hold
Yeah,
judgment.
yeah.
I'm fine with you saying it. I'm
Yeah.
fine with you saying it. I respect both of you. I'm gonna
I
hold
wouldn't do that.
judgment. What?
I wouldn't do that, but,
But
Well, yeah,
apparently,
you're a Raiders fan.
But
Fuck
apparently the portrayal
Okay,
is-
Antonio Brown.
apparently the portrayal of Bruce Lee is actually pretty accurate. That he was this little rich
Yeah.
kid.
I can't
Um,
imagine somebody like Brad Pitt, Leonardo DiCaprio portraying him in a
Well,
non-real way.
And more do
But
with
I'm also from my household loved Bruce Lee, so I'm
yeah,
I'm
no,
gonna,
me too. Me too.
Yeah.
I love
Okay,
Bruce Lee. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of it's to do with I think Tarantino wouldn't have done wrong.
Good
And-
point. Good point.
And apparently
Very
the
good
actor who
point.
played Bruce Lee is obsessed with Bruce Lee. And so it's
Okay.
hard to imagine that this
Yeah,
actor
that
who
entire
loves
conglomerate.
Bruce Lee
Yeah.
would be fine with. But no, apparently Bruce Lee was a dick. Like
yeah,
arrogant,
yeah.
Yeah.
little rich kid, mean, knew he would beat the shit out of everybody. And he may have actually gotten beat up by someone like Brad Pitt.
Until he fought Missouri's own Brad Pitt.
Yeah, dude, the movie is incredible. It's not until the
It
end.
is.
It's not until the end where you're like, oh,
Did they
yeah.
go into the Manson shit?
It's
It,
not.
it,
that's the,
it touches
that's the,
on it
That's the thing is that
very
it's not
at
until
the
it's not until
end.
the end where you're like, oh,
It's-
yeah.
It's
this
actually not
is-
until the end where you're like, oh yeah, this is a Tarantino
Yep.
movie.
Yeah,
That was my
because
response.
Margot
Yes.
Robbie plays her.
Right.
She plays
Sharon
Tate.
Tate. Yeah.
You know what's interesting about that, and I'm guessing that this probably is not the same for you guys because I'm guessing my parents are a little bit older than your guys' parents because I'm also a little bit older than you, and they had me a little bit later in life.
Well,
But
my dad's 83.
no, he's not. That's not your dad. If he is, he's the spryest 83-year-old.
He's a good-looking 83-year-old.
But what's interesting is for my parents in particular, that murder of Sharon Tate became such an important cultural touchstone and an event that struck fear in their hearts in a way that I cannot describe. And I mean that murder is like on the same level with September 11th
And
in
JFK.
terms of the fear, and JFK in terms of the fear that it struck in their hearts. And so to reimagine a world in which that hadn't happened.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. Sorry.
Sorry, Alex.
No, go ahead. No, it's fine. So,
To
I don't get
reima-
worried about
yeah.
spoiler
Okay,
alerts.
no, I don't either. Yeah,
To
because the story's
reimagine-
good or it's not.
To reimagine a world in which that didn't happen.
So
That
it
was-
doesn't
and,
happen in the
and
movie?
to open up the
No.
possibility
Yeah, it's cool.
that fear never
Wow.
engrips that
It-
whole generation of Americans.
It's his most positive ending too, because Sharon Tate and them. It's like, it's actually a happy ending.
It is a happy ending for the first time ever.
Yeah, you're like,
That's awesome.
Is this happy?
and what it's it's interesting because like I really want to see like a good interview with him about what it
Wow.
was he was trying to say in the movie, which I
Yeah.
have searched for and have not found.
Wait, what? Just say it. What he's trying to say in the movie? What do you mean?
Well, I don't know what he's
I have
trying
no
to
idea,
say.
yeah.
I
Okay.
would like for him to say what he's trying to say, but I haven't seen an interview where he actually says it. But I think what he's trying to say is that the hippies kind of fucked everything up, and that if that hadn't happened, America would be a much better place.
It's a very conservative movie.
And I don't know that I disagree with
it's a
his
conservative movie. Yeah.
his outlook on that.
It's conservative.
It is a super conservative ending, but there's something to say for, I think I said this a podcast ago or maybe 2 podcasts ago because I've now been on this like a billion times, but that is the fundamental problem with liberalism, right? If you question every aspect of society, eventually you have unroaded everything.
That's just the hippies in the movie. Yeah,
And that's
yeah,
what he's getting
yeah.
at with the hippies,
It's a really
right?
conservative movie.
And that's what I think he's trying to say is that there has to be limits to how much within our culture we're willing to question and devalue. And there are some things that we just have to blindly accept because society has to be built on something.
Because
My mind is, and I'm sorry to interrupt you. My mind is completely fucking blown by the fact that they just erased that.
even Brad Pitt and DiCaprio in the movies are not. They're fucking losers.
They're total losers.
Right?
Yeah, and I've
They
heard
are
that.
the absolute worst people. You're like,
Yeah.
why would I want to be like Brad Pitt? right? In the
Yeah,
movie,
he's a
just
stuntman that-
sad.
Yeah.
he
Who's
just
never-
follows the one
Who
guy.
had never had a career actually.
Yeah.
But
That's the whole
he's-
point. Is that he's never had a career.
all they are though is vehicles for disrupting the direction of America.
Yeah. It's awesome. It's a good movie.
It's such a good
I am
movie.
so excited
It's
now
a
to
good
see that.
movie.
Like, and again, this is what I was trying to say. Like, I don't get bothered by spoilers. When I saw Endgame and the guy that goes and dies, I haven't seen the movie yet. I know who dies. I'm so excited to see
I don't
it.
care.
Yeah, I don't care, but the storyline that almost interests me more.
Once
and I
Upon a
think that's
Time in
amazing.
Hollywood is amazing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Endgame, I don't
I'm-
think so much is so good, but
I'm
I'm
excited.
a comic book guy, and I hate our Marvel movies. I haven't seen anything since. It's been a
Of
long
course you
time.
are.
Yeah, yeah. I saw Black Panther. It's the last one I think I've seen.
It's like being friends with a 12-year-old.
Yeah.
What did you think about Black Panther?
I actually thought it was reactionary.
Yeah.
It was super conservative
I haven't seen
because
it.
you know who the hero is? Deathmonger or
Yeah.
Killmonger.
Yep.
Killmonger's the hero.
Yeah, it's a weird
You
pivot.
know who should have
Isn't
weapons?
Black Panther the hero?
No, he's not.
No,
No,
he's
no,
not
no.
at all.
Apparently,
No.
I need to see this movie.
Because you
Yeah.
know who
Nope. It-
should have guns?
And it is the most
Black people. Right?
that's the point.
That's the point. Is that
And
so-
it's fine, but it's just a
It's
weird
wrong.
moment in the movie where we're like, what the fuck
What?
is going on?
Yeah. So Killmonger is the villain, and his idea is that all
Michael B.
these
Jordan.
Michael B. Jordan is that
Yep.
all these weapons in Wakanda,
Good
which
looking
is
man.
where Black Panther lives,
Yeah.
is that so Wakanda has all these advanced weapons, and what's happening across the world? People of color being killed,
Sure, right.
like for no reason.
Yeah, the
And
entire
so-
premise makes sense.
And so Killmonger is like, who
Ar-
needs these weapons?
Armed black folk.
People of color.
I
And,
will-
Black Panther's like, no, we can't give common people weapons. Like, no. Killmonger is right.
Well, and that's an awesome
Fuck
point because you're
royalty.
like,
Fuck
common
royalty.
people versus people of color, and it's like this weird moment where you're just
Yeah.
like, I mean, he's got
No, Killmonger is
you
right.
can't
No,
let
Killmonger is
everybody
right.
like you can't let yourself kill
Mhm.
fuck, I have no idea what's going on.
Black Panther's right. You can't kill people, but it's also like,
Yeah.
one, fuck royalty, right?
Right.
Yeah,
So
no
Black
shit.
Panther's a king, so automatically I'm against him. And two, it's like, no, Killmonger, you're right. Is that who should have these advanced weapons? It's people of color, right?
Well, I will say this.
That's the point.
And at the very end, there is a moment where he's like, yeah, fuck him. And you're just like, no, wait, hold on. It's
Yeah,
like,
no.
where are we going to bomb? Everywhere. Like, and everyone's okay with this.
You can't do that either. But
No.
still, Killmonger was still right. I would still say it was Killmonger.
Yeah, it was
every time.
kind of a mind fuck.
You
But
know,
it was,
It's reactionary. It's a right wing conservative movie for sure.
yeah, and it's
But it's
really,
Marvel,
like,
right? Marvel is, you know who the good guys are in Marvel? It's military-industrial complex.
Yeah.
It's weapons
and-
contractors
Mind
And I will say,
blown.
like, it's a military-industrial complex with a conscience.
and privatized.
Oh, sure.
And it's
Yeah,
it's privatized,
Robert Downey
right?
Jr.
It's privatized,
hates
yeah.
government. He hates everybody about government.
It's
but he
privatized.
also makes a lot of fucking
It's
money off of
privatized.
government.
It's all privatized. I hate it. The
Well-
Marvel movies are so right-wing. I hate it.
Well, I'll say this.
You're the first person I've ever heard, though, that says that, and I totally agree,
Yeah.
but it's hilarious
It's
to hear your version
destructive.
versus everybody
it's
else.
destructive right-wing, too, right? It's military contractors and military-industrial. That's who's going to save us. It's like, no,
Well, yeah, the
Tony
first-
Stark is not a good guy.
No, the first movie was
He's
and-
evil.
And to be fair, Stan Lee built him that way,
He
and
did,
we all
yeah.
just
he
fucking
did.
loved
no,
him.
he did, yeah.
The weirdest
No,
thing
yeah.
was when I got compared to Robert Downey Jr.'s version of Tony Stark. They were like, "You're kind of like him." It's like, no. He's a terrible guy.
He's not a hero.
No, he's been fuck off. No, but he really is an anti-hero. But that first scene where it's like everybody, and I'm not even going to say center left. I'm going to say further right from center left is like, fuck bombing every country. What's
Yeah.
the first scene of the movie? He stands like this with his
Yeah.
arms spread wide and just bombs a desert. And everybody's like, it's Robbie Downey Jr. Good job,
Yeah,
everybody.
yeah, nah.
We win.
The Marvel movies probably helped give us Trump, right? It's a bunch of might makes right. I hate it. I hate the Marvel movies.
And it was built under Obama.
Well,
It was built under Obama.
I'll say this.
You also please might makes right. Say about Obama, but
We don't have enough time to argue about Barry.
I
You
I
keep
like-
that man's
I
mouth
like-
name out of your mouth, son.
I
or I'll
like-
smack it out of there.
I I think Barack Obama was good at being president. I think everything else is. I think he's a
We're gonna throw
warmongering.
I'm not gonna throw down.
Warmongering.
I'm hearing
criminal.
this.
Look.
I'm happy as can fucking be
Barack
right
was a
now.
war criminal.
Can't have an empire you
He
don't
was a war
protect, son.
criminal. No, yeah,
And you better go halfway across the globe to protect that motherfucker.
We can get back to. I don't think you can be a Christian and be a politician.
Damn.
You can't.
Yeah.
No, it's impossible.
I'm fine
you can't.
with that.
You can't. Right? You can't be president and be a Christian because you know what it means to be president?
I don't think you can be steadfast in any belief you
kill
have
people.
and be a politician.
You got to kill people if you're president.
You do have to kill. Actually, you know,
Yeah.
I think we talked about this last. One of the things I'll give Trump is he has been super shy about killing people,
Yeah.
which I did not
Is
expect.
weird.
It's weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because like
Yep.
all of his other character flaws, you really would have expected him to like hop on board killing
Yeah,
people,
you would think
and he
so.
really is like not okay with it.
Yeah, well, he's more of like, and I don't want to use this word, but I think you two will understand what I mean. Like, he's more of a war pussy than you could imagine. Like when you talk about when you talk about
no,
war,
I
he's
think
like
that's true.
when he was doing his campaign, when he was on the campaign trail, he was like, "We're gonna torch motherfuckers. I will shank them
I
in the
think
face."
he knows it's
And
a
then it was
lose.
like the moment he became president, this is one thing I do like
He-
about the guy. He was like, "Yeah, but I mean, if we do, that actually means that we hurt people."
He likes the pomp and circumstance of the military, but he doesn't seem to like the reality very much. Which
No.
I gotta say, though, actually,
No, he loves the salutes and he loves the
Yeah.
handshakes.
in some
That's-
ways, it also concern. It's kind
Jesus.
of.
I think
It's.
What the
he's.
fuck was
I
that?
think he's fine of killing people. I just think he.
I don't know.
I don't
again,
think so.
has-
I don't
has
think
a
he
sen-
is.
I think he has a sense that it's not popular.
No, I don't. Well,
No, well,
yeah,
I would agree that he's a
Yeah,
populist.
no,
I
he
don't
give a
think he's okay
fuck.
killing people.
Nah, he'd be fine if it knew
No,
it would help him win
I
in
disagree.
2020.
So. I don't think so. I think he has shied away from it so much at every moment that he had an opportunity to just smack somebody down.
Yeah, well, I mean, think about like when we had Mad Dog in there and they dropped the Moab. And
Yeah,
what
yeah.
was that? Iraq that he dropped it, or Yemen?
Afghanistan.
It was
It
Yemen.
was it
Yemen,
Afghanistan?
yeah.
Okay,
Wait,
So he
that was
dropped the
Afghanistan,
Moab.
Maybe it was Yemen.
was it
Was.
Yemen? Okay, so either
Yeah.
way,
Yeah.
country that nobody knows, and even the two of you historians don't know.
It's somewhere in the Arabian Peninsula.
Yeah. But I mean, even that, it's like, so we dropped that, it blows up, and even Trump was like, yeah, we dropped it. It was awesome and blew stuff up,
Well, they
and
did it-
I'm very uncomfortable talking
They
about
did
this.
it in the middle of the night and told him it was coming.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like that. Yeah.
And it was Mattis who was like, bitch, if you want the State Department to come over there, that's cool, but you don't want me over there.
Yeah, I mean that. You know, this is probably we'll have to save this for another podcast because
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is where
'Cause
where
I gotta get going.
the
soon.
three of
Oh,
us
okay, sorry.
Yeah,
differ
yeah.
greatly. But if you're gonna have an empire, you're gonna have to protect it.
No, and I disagree, which is why I'm saying you can't be a Christian and a politician. You can't be a Christian and a president. You can't be a Christian and
Sure.
something. Yeah.
All right, so expand on that in like 2 minutes because I know you have to leave. I get
You
it.
gotta go. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand. But I really do want to understand that.
Yeah. Oh no, just the simple fact of the matter is, read the New Testament, and tell me how many times Jesus.
Killed people.
Yeah.
He overturned a couple of
or
tables.
told you to kill people.
Yeah, he didn't.
Right. Well,
Well, that was the argument that we were talking about where I call myself a Christian.
It is. The violence there is not directed at. I mean, it is aimed at people. It's more aimed at a systemic problem than it is at.
Yep.
It's more of a symbolic action.
Yeah.
Which got him killed.
Yeah,
But
which
you
should
can't-
tell you all you need to know. About
Which you
government.
can't read the Bible. You can't read the Bible and be like, oh yeah, I want to be a Christian and a politician, at least president. You can't be commander in chief.
Yep.
And a Christian. Maybe like a mayor. You could be.
No, this is a very
even-
antiquated system we
even
have right now.
even governor is questionable, but you can't be president. You can't be commander in chief, and order the death of people, and in good conscience call yourself a Christian.
Totally agree.
Yeah, because Jesus, he didn't kill a lot of people.
No,
Yeah.
like zero. I mean,
Yeah,
maybe like
zero, yeah.
maybe between like 2 and 32, there's
He might
some
have,
argument.
No, 2 and 30.
They
2 and
left-
30. Yeah,
they
no.
left out that
12
part where
12
you totally went
No, it's
serial
12.
killer.
It's
They-
12.
They
No,
left out
it's
the
12.
18-year-old rampage Jesus.
It's like 12 and 30. It's 12 and 30. Yeah,
It's
12.
the deaths are in the Book
So
of
it's
Mormon.
about 18 years we have that are missing.
that are questioned.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, hey, I know you have to leave. Root, thank you.
Thanks, Alex,
Honestly,
man.
I really
Hell
appreciate
yeah,
you coming
dude,
on.
it's gonna be a good
Anytime, especially when your book comes out. Jesus Christ, we have to
It's gonna be a
talk
bit,
more
yeah,
about
yeah.
Oral Roberts. Kory, anytime. Seriously, man.
Yeah.
You basically carry this podcast every
Yeah,
time you're
well,
on here.
We'll have to come back with more of a maybe because we were gonna talk about the strenuous life.
Oh,
Yeah,
we still got to talk about the
Yeah,
Yeah,
and seriously,
Yeah.
anytime,
We'll have an
like,
agenda sometime.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
no, this was awesome, but like next Tuesday, just come on. I really don't give a fuck. This was an
Yeah.
amazing podcast. Just thank you
Yeah,
so
we'll
much
talk-
for
we'll
all of
talk.
you coming on.
Buy
Thank you.
more beer.
Yeah. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
Yeah, my friend from